time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to foot.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
What's up, everybody? A pleasant good evening to you all. Welcome, dissidents one and all, to a very special Sunday evening edition of the DueDissidence podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
All righty, everybody. So we have a wonderful show in store for you guys this evening. Thank you to everybody who showed up on time. Big crowd in here to start the show, so please hit that like button and please hit that subscribe button. If you are here for the first, second, or third time and have not hit that subscribe button yet, we shall waste no time here getting into the substance of our show. We have, of course, a very special guest host tonight who we are thrilled to be talking to. She is the host of the Sabs podcast on YouTube, and she's also a contributor and co-host over at the Revolutionary Blackout Network. She also does a call-in podcast. She's all over the place. You all know who she is. Sabrina Sabby, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks
Absolutely.
for coming on, Sabby.
Yeah, no, it's always great to talk to you. And it was a pleasure being on your show. I think that was a few weeks ago by now. I know we've been making the rounds, but that was quite a bit of fun. I remember we got to actually sit in on the live Trump response to the indictment. So yeah, that must have been a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that was something else. That was crazy, actually, because I didn't know they were going to do that announcement that night at the time when we had scheduled the event.
I remember that.
And then it just happened that they were doing that. I was like, oh, this should be interesting.
Yeah.
And then I was watching The Black Conservative, and I was like, "Oh, there we are."
Yeah, they featured us on his
show. We
We
got clipped because we were the only ones who caught that. Apparently, who caught that like cutoff that MSNBC did.
Right, because we happened to be watching the NBC stream of that speech, and they cut out. So we have a full show tonight. We have a lot of great stuff to talk about with you, Sabby. It's usually a formality, this first question, when we ask people, how'd you get started in this space? How did you get into the world of political commentary? In your case, though, I really am interested to know, because unlike myself and Russell, and unlike most people in this space,
you're very professional.
You seem to be the kind of person that has other options available to them in life. You know? Whereas, like, most people who do this are just kind of, these curmudgeonly miscreants like Russell and I, who really have nothing else going for us in that way. So
yeah, that's where the old saying comes from. What's the difference between a bum and a podcaster? The podcast.
Oh.
The podcast, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. But I'm curious as to your background and how you got into this. Do you want to almost everybody in our audience already knows who you are, obviously, because we share a large audience. But do you want to, just for anybody who doesn't know you, introduce yourself? And I would like to know how you got into this.
Sure, absolutely. I do have a little bit of broadcasting experience because I did major in broadcast journalism in undergrad. So that may be where some of it comes from. So I had experience with production, and I had experience with on-air talent. I actually did an internship for a local news station. This is many years ago, a while back. And I just saw how the media was and how they would censor people, how they would constantly edit over like my video footage, like things like that. I didn't like. So I ended up going into healthcare, I think first. Yes, I worked in healthcare first, and then eventually went into education. So I've kind of been a little bit all over the place, to be honest. But I started my show actually after Force the Vote. And I just remember watching that whole experience and just being very frustrated and just seeing such a lost opportunity that I thought we could have had on the left. And I was pretty angry about it. And so that's actually what kind of pushed me to start like the podcast, so to speak. In the beginning, I started off doing interviews. So when people do ask me, like, how do you get so many guests? That's actually how I started. I started doing interviews with people who were activists and people who were progressive candidates running at that time, even some of the local races. And then I started to transition more into news. So it became news and interviews. And then I eventually got to the point where once I got more equipment, I was able to go on the ground. That is not without the help of my producer, Eric. I could not do this without Eric. I've tried. It's not doesn't go too well when I do it without him. But I think for me, there was just a lot of frustration in reference to that Bernie Sanders movement, which I came from. And I felt like there was a lot of missed opportunities. And I just needed a way to express that other than on Facebook. So originally, I was writing down my frustrations on Facebook, and I realized that really wasn't the place for this. People didn't want to hear it. And they were like, why don't you just put this on YouTube? This is really not the platform for that. And so that's really what got me going. And as time has gone by, I just walked away from the duopoly altogether because I realized it's the system. It's not really so much the candidate, it's the system in place that makes these things impossible.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely
how many friends did you lose on Facebook before you realized that?
Quite a bit, actually. Quite a bit. I didn't want to vote for Joe Biden. And, you know, a lot of my friends were just like, are you crazy? We're going to get Donald Trump if you don't support him. Bernie Sanders is a wasted. Do not support Bernie Sanders or anybody else. And they felt like Bernie Sanders was actually dividing the Democratic Party. And they said, this is actually going to help Trump win. And so, yeah, I lost friends in the process because of that. It's really weird over a guy I'd never even met.
Right.
Well, I come out of a theater background. We both do, actually. And that has been one of the great disappointments of my life, to see how shit-lib the artists were. Because literally in 2016, the day that I said, you know, I'm going to back Sanders in the primary, I had about 25% of my Facebook just unfriend me immediately.
Disappear.
Immediately. No, it was this mass unfriending as soon as I said I was backing. It's not even like I said I'm backing Donald Trump. Which still you should be able to tolerate disagreement. Bernie Sanders. God knows what I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think that is I think that's what motivated quite a few of us, you know, at different perhaps points in time. But I think a common thing is like we kind of got tired of just arguing with our friends about this. And so we decided, let's create something positive instead of just wasting time arguing. And for the longest time, Russell wanted to do both. Russell would do the show, and then he would go and he would fight with people in the comments and on Facebook and on Twitter. And I said, listen, the reason we did this, the reason we started this is so we wouldn't have to fight with people anymore. We put the show out. That's it. That's my opinion. Now leave me alone. You know, and that's the way I view it.
No, you know how that started. At the beginning, I was trying to juice the algorithm when we had like 500 subscribers.
Right.
And then I just
never engagement.
I was trying to drive engagement. I just never really got out of the habit. And also, you know, I'm pugnacious. And I do feel like I don't. Do you go into the comment section? Like, I feel like I don't want to be. I want to engage, like you're watching. So I feel like I should try to make myself available to answer questions, but then you don't always know if you've got a psycho by the tail. See, that's what happens. Like, you want to answer a question and then they go full psycho. And before you know it, you're in this back and forth where you just meant to clarify a point.
Yes. Yeah. I used to do that in the beginning. When my channel was much smaller, I did used to answer like the comments. And then eventually I pulled away from that because there's some creepy things. There's some interesting people in the comment section. And some of them are, you know who like your real like subscribers are. And then there's that one person that'll show up every video in the comment section and just keep saying the same thing. And it's just kind of weird and bizarre. So I try to avoid the comments.
You know what finally got through to me? Somebody, it was like a week ago, somebody followed me to Twitter and, was just ranting about DueDissidence as like the evil that must be stopped before it grows any further. I was like, all right, man. All right. Eventually one of these people is going to show up at my house, man. I got to stop.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So Sabby, one of the topics that we were going to cover last week, but since we knew you were coming on, I wanted to wait until now because you did a great segment on the Ralph Yarl shooting in Kansas City. And that was one of several sort of wrong place, wrong time shootings that happened over the past week. Kaylin Gillis, sorry, excuse me, in Hebron, New York. She was shot pulling into a stranger's driveway right up here, about 20 miles north of where I live right now. Wrong driveway, 65-year-old man came out, shot her. She actually died. Yarl, thankfully, is looking like he is on pace to make a full recovery. There were two cheerleaders, Peyton Washington and Heather Roth in Texas. They were shot after entering a wrong vehicle by accident in a store parking lot. Just these acts of sort of paranoid violence that seem to just happen right in a set this week. There was another dispute over a basketball drifting into a neighbor's yard this week that resulted in a young child being shot as well. And so I would love to get your perspective on this because one of the things you said was that, pardon me, we are just a country that fears each other and how that really transcends quite a bit of the divides. Not to say there aren't certain divides, not to say violence doesn't affect certain communities more than others, but there does just seem to be this universal quality of paranoia and fear that's gripped the country. And I thought you spoke very, very well to that. So do you want to speak to that now?
Sure. And I think that fear comes from mainstream media. Unfortunately, they have pretty much trained people to fear their neighbors. The incident with Ralph Yarl, I mean, it's not like he lived far away. So people have to understand that, like, these are people within the community. And I think that we have to ask ourselves, why are we afraid of each other? Where does that message come from? And I think it comes from mainstream media. They have taught you to fear your neighbor. They said, don't trust your Trump voting neighbor, right? Don't trust your Bernie Sanders voting neighbor. Like, they have divided the people based on red team, blue team. And so we're not really focused on the real issue, which is the class issue, which is the fact that we should all be coming together to team up against the oligarchs. And I feel like that is not happening for the most part in this country. It's happening in France, because they realize who the real enemy is. So I think that if you sit down and you watch these networks, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and you're not aware of the narrative that they are trying to push, it can become really easy to become afraid of the very people that you should actually be in solidarity and in community with. And that can happen to anyone who's not aware that CNN lies to you like half of the day. It's 24-hour news. They're not telling you the truth for 24 hours. They don't realize that. So I think that what needs to change, right? I think we need to, first of all, you need to know your neighbors. How many people watching don't even know who lives next door to them? Like, that's more common today than it was when our parents were growing up. So that's a big part of the problem. And two, I think people have to realize that these events have happened before. They happened before social media. You didn't hear about it as much because we didn't have social media. There was an incident in Columbia, South Carolina. It was many years ago. This is when I was an undergrad. There was a gentleman who opened the door to trick-or-treaters, a bunch of kids just trick-or-treating together, and he shot all of them.
Jesus. Wow.
That didn't make national news. This was before Facebook. This is before all of that. So I think that social media has actually made these stories more visible, whereas before you just didn't hear about it unless you lived like in that area for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, do you think word spreading about these things in some way triggers a paranoid response in people? Like, even though it's, you would think in theory, hearing about these things would make people more aware not to do it. But I feel like in a certain sense, violence begets violence, and violent media, whether it's reporting on violence as if it shouldn't happen, right? I'm not saying we have a media that glorifies violence, therefore violence happens. I just feel like once word spreads, this overall climate of uncertainty and paranoia and fear just sets in with people. Like, what else explains this 20-year-old woman up in my neck of the woods here, because I live in the Albany region now, this town where it happened, Hebron, is just about a half hour from where I am now. And my wife actually works with someone who lives closer to there. And she said, you know, in that area, it's so rural that cars get lost quite a bit because their cell signal cuts out. And so their GPS stops working. So if they like toggle out of their map for a minute and then come back, the map won't load again. So she said when she used to drive around there, she would get lost quite a bit, and she would actually go and knock on someone's door and say, hey, can you direct me to the highway or something like that, you know, like they used to do before GPSs. And to think that somebody is going to react that way, it's just absolutely horrifying. And there's something unique to this country about that. This is obviously not a gun issue, because anybody with a handgun or a shotgun could do that to you. We're not talking about a mass shooting here where it's the weapon itself that does it. But there's a certain frontier mentality, I guess. You know, if you watch the old Western movies, when one cowboy rolls up to the other cowboy's home, you know, on a horse, like, what does the cowboy do? Smile and say, hey, come on in for a drink? No, he snarls, grabs the gun, you know, like, what's this guy want? I think there's a real element of that. Why are you here? Why are you in my space? What are you doing here? I don't know you. Like you said, people don't know their neighbors here. You know, there's not a sense of neighborhood anymore. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say there was a study done a while back. This was around the time of the Virginia Tech mass shooting. I don't know if everyone remembers that, but this was years ago. There was a student at Virginia Tech who actually committed like a mass shooting on campus. And it eventually got to the point where media was actually told not to talk about it as much anymore, because it was actually, they felt like it would actually promote copycat attacks. So there is also this idea that the more you talk about these issues, the more the media focuses on every single school shooting, the mass shootings that happen, the more they tend to increase. So there's that piece to it too. So I think you have, you know, both of those things, two things going on here. People are afraid of each other for ridiculous reasons a lot of times. And also there's the element of promoting, and I know the news is not really trying to promote it, but some people can see it that way, constantly talking about that type of violence. And then you have copycat crimes as well.
I think it's partly what you're talking about with the media, which, you know, Matt Taibbi has probably written the most about that, how we have this siloed off media where their business model is hate. Their business model is making you hate people and make you angry. I was listening to Chris Hedges on a podcast,
who Sabby just interviewed this afternoon, by the way.
Right. I thought, well, maybe you talked about this. And he was talking about how, you know, in a state of social isolation, which so many people are in today, they're very susceptible to these hateful ideologies as a means of connecting, as a means of belonging. And I think you put those two things together and you get a picture of people who are socially isolated and just constantly pickled in these hateful ideologies that make them feel like they belong to something. They belong to a group. And I would certainly include the liberals in that. I would certainly include that this upset Trump, and the Trump voters. And right. I mean, it's the same shit. And he actually talked about how, you know, once you're in that, you can't reject any part of it, because then you'll lose that. So I think that's part of it too. Yeah.
Right. And I think people are spending too much time online. You know, I used to tell this to my students, like their Gen Z group. And I used to tell them that, you know, just because you're spending a lot of time on social media in these chat rooms and like Discord and all that kind of stuff, you're actually not as connected with people as you think you are. Like they feel like they're connected. And what they're losing is having those in-person interactions that I think a lot of us grew up having. That was more common before social media. And now you add the pandemic to that as well. If you were in one of those states that was locked down like I was, like people became more accustomed to communicating with people online through social media. And again, they think they're connected. They're like, I have all these friends, and some of these people they've never, ever met in real life. So we have to get back to having those in-person connections, I think, in this country.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Absolutely. Russell, you're on here. Your video.
I can still be heard, right?
Yeah, you can still be heard, but you're going to go out and come back in?
I'm going to go out and come back in. I don't know what's going on with this. I don't know if it's the USB ports or what, but I'll be back.
Okay. All right.
Carry on.
We'll carry on. All right, cool. All right. Sorry about that, Sabby. All right. So let's move on to our next segment here, because you were at the RFK Jr. campaign launch. You were there with a camera and a mic, and you actually covered that launch. And it is Sunday, folks, so we have a little Sunday funny prepared for you all, because Sabby claimed on her show that the only big network that was there covering the show was Fox News, but actually MSNBC did cover the RFK launch. They just did their own version of coverage. It wasn't nearly as long. Just like with Trump, they ended up cutting out very, very quickly into the speech, but we do have some footage here of MSNBC's coverage of the RFK campaign launch. So just for the record, let's take a look at how MSNBC covered the RFK Jr. campaign announcement speech.
Strategy in this country has been to project power around the world. And that's how, our strategy to control the world. The Chinese did something different. My uncle's philosophy and strategy, which is...
He's horrified. He's just talking big. The walls are closing in.
There you go. So to be fair, they did cover it, just not as thoroughly as Fox, and obviously not as thoroughly as you, Sabby. So, I feel like, our show, your show, obviously RBN does a good job of just being very, very disciplined and on point about like, okay, yeah, you might like RFK. He dropped a lot of red pills in that speech. I thought when he talked about his uncle and his uncle's battles with the deep state and the CIA, I thought he spoke very, very well about that. But at the end of the day, he is competing. The reason why I thought it was good to do a sort of MSNBC parody is because you have to remember, when you are running in a Democratic primary, it's not just what you're saying. This is what so many people don't understand. The operative point here is who you're saying it to. Who you are saying it to. You cannot win a Democratic primary unless you appeal to the MSNBC audience, who is just unreachable. I mean, they didn't cover the launch. If they did, they wouldn't have covered it too differently from our little parody video there. So what are your thoughts on his candidacy? What did you think of his speech? What was it like in the room? What was the response? Go ahead, have the floor.
What was it like there? I was actually surprised there were as many people there as there were. It was a lot of people. I did not expect that many people to show up. You did have to register to attend the event. So just FYI for people wondering, like all those people were registered online. And I would say the people who were in the room, they actually were really excited about him. Like they had their Kennedy signs and everything. I was in the press area. So all of the attendees, or what I thought was all of the attendees, were in front of me. But there were 3 other overflow rooms where they had to put everybody else, apparently, because of the whole fire code and all that stuff. But, I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons. Some of the pros, he called out the deep state. He called out the military industrial complex, calling out the CIA. He called out he had his criticism about the Russia-Ukraine war in reference to what the Biden administration was doing. Yep. I thought he had a really nuanced take on that, to be honest. And he also called out the fact that mainstream media is a problem, that they're lying to the American people. So this is something I feel like Bernie Sanders did not do. I feel like he didn't really come after mainstream media like that, even though they were smearing him constantly. So he called out that. And now here's where he lost me. He said that he understands that the Democratic Party is problematic and it has its issues. But then he goes on to say that he believes that the Democratic Party can be reformed. He wants to change the Democratic Party back to the days of his father and his uncle. He wants it to get back to that. This was after he told us everything they did to his father and his uncle. So it's just like, what are you talking about?
Man, that's loyalty. I got to tell you, if you're still loyal to them after that, I got to give them that.
Yeah, so I think he wants it both ways. You know, he says you don't walk away from family. He sees the Democratic Party as a family of sorts. So there was that. He really didn't focus that much on the jab. I'm be safe here, called the jab, as people would have thought that he would. That was actually a very small segment of his speech, and he focused on other things. He told a lot of family stories, which I felt like those could have been minimized. He put too much time on that, in my opinion, instead of just focusing on the policies. But it could just be that he did that because he was in Boston and this is where they're from. So that could be why he did that. The other thing, the issue with the CIA, and this is something that people are going to bring up. He talked about how problematic the CIA is and that, you know, they pretty much killed his father and his uncle, that kind of thing. But then he goes on to say that there are good people in the CIA and that his daughter-in-law is one of them and that she's one of the leads for his campaign. And I'm like, no, like you can't have it both ways. And you can't help who your family members are. But I think I would not have chosen a former CIA member to be a part of my campaign, let alone, you know, lead my campaign. So people saw that he was, at least me and my producer did, we saw that he was trying to both sides it a little bit. It's interesting. Chris Hedges, we just talked about this earlier too. And Chris Hedges was like, yeah, I saw that speech.
Yeah. Well, Hedges is obviously on our side of this, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because even when he talked about his uncle and the Bay of Pigs and how the deep state set him up, that was a real red pill moment. I love that part of the speech. But then he followed that up by suggesting that the deep state also crossed George W. Bush. Because he mentioned right after this, and George W. Bush says his biggest regret was listening to George Tenet. And I'm like, whoa, dude. It would be offensive for me to say that. You're not offending yourself by comparing. Your uncle was a genuine man of peace who was actually manipulated and lied into doing something he did not want to do. He did not want to go through with the Bay of Pigs. The CIA convinced him to do it. And in my opinion, the reason they whacked him is because after it failed, they were certain he would have no choice but to double down and actually start a land war in Cuba. And when he didn't do that, they were like, holy shit, this guy's just going to take the most massive political L we've ever seen. He would sooner do that than start a war. This means we can't control him, which means he's got to go, right? But anyway, that is speculation on my part. What's not is that he did not want to do the Bay of Pigs. They convinced him to do that. That's very different from George W. Bush retroactively scapegoating the head of the CIA when a war that he himself always wanted to start went south. And that really sort of indicates this sort of complexity of RFK, where like on the one hand, yeah, he drops a lot of red pills, he goes at them pretty hard, but ultimately he is kind of, I mean, he's a Kennedy, he's a very inside the system guy, and he seems to defer to the system a little too much for someone who's been through what he's been through, I think.
Right, I think so too, and I think that Dennis Kucinich spoke before him, so he's a part of his campaign as well. Yep. I believe he's the campaign manager. Yeah. It's just, you know, with both of them, Dennis Kucinich has been a part of the Democratic Party. He's already had this experience. He's experienced them pushing him out of the Democratic Party, redrawing his district so that he didn't have one. He already knows how this is going to go for RFK Jr. And to me, it's really frustrating. Why are you trying to be a part of a party that doesn't want you there? It's just like they made it very obvious. So I really wish that RFK Jr. was running as an independent, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican, although he'd probably have more success probably running as a Republican, to be honest with you, at this point. Based on the people that I've talked to and people have reached out to me, people across different political ideologies, Republican, Democrat, and independent, have contacted me and said they will support him just on the anti-war message alone. Like that's all they need. So that's why I was like, you should definitely just run as an independent. The DNC is going to screw him over. I think he knows this. I know Dennis Kucinich knows this. So to me, it's just like, what are they doing? I don't know if maybe they have a different strategy to start out as a Democrat, and then when the DNC does screw him over, then maybe just do a dirty break or run as independent or whatever. But you have to take that pledge. He has to pledge in the beginning if he's going to support the Democrat nominees. So to me, it's just it's interesting. I will say I would not write him off. And I would also say the narrative that the media is using, calling him the anti-jab candidate, that may actually work in his favor, because I think they're assuming that he's just trying to get Democrat voters. I disagree with that. He could have people from all sides. So
Well, that's all
some
the
of the
more
younger
reason.
people might.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, go ahead, Sabby.
Oh, some of the younger people might think that he's based. So
Well,
it just,
this is why I think he has crossover appeal and should run as an independent. I mean, it just is the most logical lane, because he's obviously far to the left of the Democrats on many, many issues. And then he is what, I wouldn't even consider to the right, but certainly most Democrats would say he's to the right of them on certain issues, even though I don't think that really makes sense.
Those things just don't even mean
right.
anything
It doesn't even
anymore.
make sense. But anyway, no,
So-
I think he has a lot of crossover potential. And I do want to read his book before I comment on any of the other stuff, because I feel like, and the reason I'm interested in reading his book is because obviously he's in the news now, he's running. But I also feel like there are certain people who the establishment just hates so much that you really can't find out what they're about unless you hear it straight from them, because because the establishment just hates them with such a passion that they'll never accurately represent their views in media. Like, you can't read an op-ed in the New York Times about RFK and actually trust that you are understanding what RFK feels about whatever X thing they are writing about, because of course they have an interest in twisting it to make him look as bad as possible. So I'll read the book before I comment on any of that. But I do think, overall you are right. I think there is a wide lane for him as an independent candidate.
Yeah, I really agree. Right now, there's one other one, Afroman, who's rapper.
Yes,
he's running as independent, and I mean, like, his platform is pretty. I thought it was pretty decent. Like, one of the things that he has is to stop sending money in reference to foreign aid. Like, he wants to stop. So I think that message, like, stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, the anti-war message, I think those messages in general have a vast appeal among the American people, regardless of your political ideology. And for people who are non-voters, they may come out to support something like that. So I think that's the difference. So when people ask about the comparison, if you can imagine, I've already gotten flack from people saying like, oh, I see you covered RFK Jr.'s campaign on the ground. Where was this from Marianne? I don't live in D.C., dummy. I don't live there.
Well, that was what I wanted to talk
Is
about.
that where she announced? Did she announce in DC?
Yeah, she announced in Washington.
Yeah, like I can't afford to go to DC every month. And I was just there in February for the anti-war rally. So they're like, why didn't you do this for Marianne? I'm like, you have money to send me to DC to cover this too. This was local for me. Why would I not cover it if it's
It was
local?
right in your backyard.
Yeah, you're not making those Kyle bucks yet?
No.
Big Kyle bucks. You raise an interesting point. I wrote an article a while ago about how really, and we're done with the duopoly, but in theory, if progressives were really going to try to reform a political party, they'd be better off trying to take over the Republicans than they would the Democrats. And in keeping with that, when you look at a lot of people who support RFK, yeah, I mean, I think he has more Trump voters than he has Democrats. Really?
Of course.
Like, if you're running anti-war,
Yeah.
if you're running anti-war and you're running against the schmack scene, then yeah, like Democratic primary voters, no less. What are you doing? Like, your best shot would be to run as a Republican.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Go ahead, Sabby.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, he's already, like, just out of the gate, numbers wise, he's ahead of Marianne Williamson. Just out of the gate, he's polling higher than Bernie Sanders was polling at this point in time.
Right.
And I think you can't ignore that. I don't know if Joe Biden's going to address this or not. Like, I don't even know if Biden knows where he is at this point in time. The last video I saw, he looked a little bit confused again. So, it's like this. I feel like they are trying to find a way to either hide Joe Biden. They are really delaying this announcement. Why hasn't he announced already? It's April 23rd.
It's an interesting point.
I think they're talking about next week sometime. I saw something
Are they?
that they're prepping an announcement, for a week or two. But we will see.
They're trying to get together just the right drug cocktail to keep them loose
Yeah.
for a 20-minute speech.
So, folks, we are taking super chats tonight, but Sabby does have limited time, so we'll be reading the super chats toward the end of the show, but we will be taking them. So those of you who did submit one, please know that we will get to them. We are not ignoring them. Sabby just has limited time, so we want to get through as much content as we can here. All right, so let's go into this. On April 20th, Congressman Jim Jordan sent a letter to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken about the shenanigans surrounding the handling of the Hunter Biden laptop story in October 2020, obviously just days before the presidential vote. And at the time all this went down, Blinken was a senior advisor to the Biden campaign. And so the letter that Jim Jordan just wrote him on April 20th concerns a transcribed interview that the Judiciary Committee conducted with Mike Morell, a former deputy director of the CIA, and he is one of the 51 signatories of the letter in October 2020, claiming that this Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. So the letter begins by establishing the timeline. So the New York Post story broke on October 14th, and this letter signed by these 51 agents came out on October 19th, just 5 days after. That was, supposedly debunking that story as a Russian op. But Jim Jordan's letter to Blinken, however, establishes once again, for probably the fifth, sixth, or seventh time by now, that there was more to this story, of course, than meets the eye. So I'm just going to read a little bit from this letter here. We're going to pick this up at the interview with Mike Morell. So the question, prior to Secretary Blinken's call, you did not have any intent to write this statement. I did not, says Mike Morell. Okay, so this call triggered, it did. That intent in you? Yes, absolutely. That same day, October 17th, you, meaning Blinken, also emailed Morell an article published in USA Today alleging that the FBI was examining whether the Hunter Biden laptop was part of a disinformation campaign. The very bottom of the email you sent to Morell included the signature block of Andrew Bates, then director of rapid response for the Biden campaign. Morell testified that his communication with you was one of a few communications he had with the Biden campaign, explaining that he also received a call from Steve Ricchetti, chairman of the Biden campaign, following the October 22nd debate to thank him for writing the statement. After the debate, I think it was after the debate, in fact, I'm pretty sure it was after the debate, I got a phone call from Jeremy Bash, who I work with at Beacon and who is active politically. Pardon me. And Jeremy said, do you have a minute to talk to Steve Ricchetti? I said, of course. He was the head of the Biden campaign at the time, and Jeremy got him on the line, and Steve thanked me for putting the statement out, and that was the extent of the conversation. Now, let's just take a quick video break here just to establish what he meant by the debate. So this is a debate moment from late October that has gone somewhat viral now since this Morell story dropped. Here is Joe Biden raising the laptop from hell, and Joe Biden blatantly lying to the camera and to the people about what a disinfo op this was, all the while his campaign was putting that in the intelligence agency's head. That's what this latest drop reveals. But let's just, for some reference, watch this. This is pretty brief.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This is where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go
President?
again with Russia.
The interesting thing there is that Trump seems genuinely taken off guard by that response. He seemed unprepared for Biden to bring up that this was a Russia hoax. He's like, come on, are you kidding me? He is like the Rodney Dangerfield guy who just wanders into this global conspiracy. What? Russia again? Huh? You know what I mean?
What are you talking about? Russia?
What are you talking
Russia?
about, Russia?
Why are we talking about Russia here? We're talking about a laptop.
Right, exactly. Like, he seemed genuinely surprised by that. So anyway, let me just go back to this for a quick moment here. We're not going to read the whole thing, but Morell further explained that one of his two goals in releasing the statement, meaning the letter that said this was Russian disinfo, was to help then Vice President Biden in the debate and to assist him in winning the election. To help him in the debate and assist him in winning the election, he testified. What was the intent of the statement? There were two intents, Morell answers. One intent was to share our concern with the American people that the Russians were playing on this issue, and two, it was to help Vice President Biden. Chairman Jordan, you wanted to help the vice president. Why? Because I wanted him to win the election. You wanted him to win? That's why? Yes, sir. Jordan concludes pretty fairly, in my view. Based on Morell's testimony, it is apparent that the Biden campaign played an active role in the origins of the public statement, which had the effect of helping him suppress the Hunter Biden story and preventing citizens from making a fully informed decision during the 2020 race. And so what you have there is Joe Biden giving that answer, just like when CNN leaked the debate questions ahead of the Clinton-Sanders debate, and she was asked a difficult question about the death penalty or something like that, and she was ready for it. Biden was ready with that answer because his campaign not only orchestrated the response, they orchestrated the piece of material that allowed him to give that response. Sabby, you covered this a couple days ago. What's your reaction to all this?
They were all covering for Hunter Biden. All of them. And this includes, you could add Merrick Garland to that list now too. All of them were in on it. Anything to protect Joe Biden so that Trump wouldn't win again. And whether you like Trump or not, you need to ask yourself, was that fair? No, it's not fair. At this point in time, Merrick Garland needs to be investigated. I don't care if he's the attorney general. He needs to be investigated for lying to Congress, which is what he did. And so I'm willing to wonder if they leak those questions to Joe Biden to prepare him for that debate. Who's to say they didn't do that for Joe Biden when he debated against Bernie Sanders in that 2020 election? He looked really sharp there, sharper than he'd been in the previous debates. But the point to get across is the fact that this is corruption at its finest. They are protecting Hunter Biden so that they can protect Joe Biden. By this point in time, all of us should have been able to see or know about what is on that laptop. Some people still think the story is false. It's just Russian disinformation. So this article, this news that came out, this is huge because now it actually confirms, no, this is not Russian disinformation. This did happen, and that laptop does exist. And people have to understand that. I'm sorry.
Well, but this is part of what's really crazy about this story, and you're seeing this increasingly. It almost feels like the hearings with Taibbi and Schellenberger were just a breaking point, where they are just, the media and the Democrats have just taken off the mask, and they are just going to go full open overt censorship, because their brain dead followers don't care anyway. They're just manufacturing a product. They're not covering this. They're not talking about this. You have a whistleblower asking to come forward about how the IRS is mishandling the Hunter Biden investigation. That's getting very little coverage. It's as usual. It's all about Trump. Now DeSantis, the two of them, they go back and forth between attacking the two of them. And this is why so many Democrats have the impression that the GOP is the party of corruption. Now, it's not that the GOP is not corrupt, but it's kind of a wash between the two. I mean, technically, if you look at the most corrupt states, it's actually not. It's Democrats. The most corrupt cities, the most corrupt states are all run by Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big. Imagine if it was the other way around. Imagine if it was Trump who actually was sitting in Biden's situation, and it was his son who had the laptop. This would be a completely different story.
Right. And the thing about the laptop is this, the credibility of that New York Post story was instantly verifiable because the subject of the story is Hunter Biden, right? The president's son, the now president's son, at that time, the nominee's son. So could the question not just be posed directly to Joe Biden? Are the revelations that came to light based upon the finding of this laptop, are they real or not? Because the only way Joe Biden wouldn't know the answer to that question is if he didn't know of any arrangement between Hunter and himself, or Hunter and the Chinese, or Hunter and the Ukrainians. Like, unless Joe Biden himself was ignorant to the affairs of his own son, which I find extremely unlikely, then he would be able to answer yes or no, whether he thought it was Russian or not. Like, he would have known, hey, is the stuff in here legit? If he says no, then he can plausibly claim, I say plausibly, not truthfully, because obviously we know it's not true, but at the time he could have been able to plausibly deny, no, none of this is true, therefore this is all some Russian op, right? But if he couldn't say that, then it's obviously not a Russian op. Or if he says that and it comes to light that they are true, then it all comes back to Hunter himself. Did Hunter communicate that to his father or not? But the bottom line is you have everything you need to know here pretty much right in front of you, right? Ultimately, it comes down to Hunter and Joe. And there is certainly a way to get to the bottom of this very, very quickly if they wanted to. They don't want to. They never wanted to. That's why that letter came forward in the first place. 51 agents saying, nope, nothing to see here.
Yep. No, I agree. I 100% agree. Like, maybe more information will come out. We need to have that pressure from the public to hold them accountable. I mean, at this point in time, this has been, how many years has this story been around now?
Oh, yeah, no, it's amazing. It's insane. Like, why not? I mean, the only thing, oddly enough, and like the Republicans are not known to exercise political restraint, but I think that must be the only thing preventing them from just calling Hunter Biden in to testify himself, because that's the whole game right there. What did Hunter Biden know and what did he tell his father, right? If you can prove that there was communication between those two and they both knew what was going on, then you could know for sure whether Joe trusted the credibility of the laptop leaks, right? And so there it is, right there. Like it's pretty clear cut at that point. It's not like this is a mystery with a million layers, right? It's not like there's a mystery with a million layers where you have to dig and dig and dig. It's two guys. You gotta interview those two guys and see what they knew and what they told the other guy. That's it, right? I mean, am I missing something? That seems to be pretty much the case.
Right. And I think this is something we can point to the Twitter files about too. Like, why are they coming so hard at Matt Taibbi? Because one of the things that was revealed in the Twitter files was the coverage up or the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story and that article from the New York Post. So the thing is that they kind of see Matt Taibbi as someone like, he's revealing information about the Democratic Party. We have to find a way to shut him down in whatever way that we can. Right. So I think, again, imagine it was the other way around. What if the information that Matt Taibbi discovered actually applied to Donald Trump? I don't think Stacey Plaskett would be trying to send Matt Taibbi to jail right now. So that's the big difference. That's the problem with like the red game, blue game. But the Twitter files did reveal a lot of information. And I think you have these organizations like the FBI and the CIA, they find it very troubling that they now have to respond to their actions because there's email evidence to show that they were asking for suppression of certain accounts and information on Twitter. So it's an eye-opening moment, I think, for a lot of Americans who have not been paying attention to the censorship and the suppression on these platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of censorship and suppression, we'll move right along here. Last week, an indictment was issued against Omali Yeshitela and other members from the African People's Socialist Party, citing Russian contributions to their campaigns that went unreported to the AG and the FEC. Tucker Carlson, in a surprising move, took to the airwaves to make the following case against their prosecution. And so this is a condensed version of a segment that he put out. Here we go. This is about 2 minutes.
This group of Americans to find their constitutionally protected opinions become felonies are, believe it or not, an organization of black nationalist left-wingers who oppose the war in Ukraine.
The U.S. government.
So this is just the tail end of a video montage of O'Malley's that he played speaking against the Ukraine.
The world that's facilitated by people like Zuckerberg.
So for what it's worth, we're not really sure who that guy is. We know he's American. Pretty sure that on a lot of issues, we likely would not agree with him. A lot of what he just...
Wonder what gave you that idea. But anyway.
I don't know. Tucker's coming around, man.
Yeah, right, exactly.
At the rate he's going, another 20 years.
Right, exactly.
He's going to be shoulder to shoulder with that guy.
Exactly.
And that video seems to be true. But even if it weren't true, even if he was wrong, it would still be constitutionally protected speech. In a free country, which we had until recently, you are allowed by definition to have dumb opinions. Most of us do, but not anymore. So that man you just saw is facing 10 years behind bars for expressing views about Ukraine that the Biden administration doesn't want to hear. That's terrifying. Does no one else think that's terrifying? It is terrifying. And to that man's credit, whoever he is, he saw it coming. Here he is at a rally last month.
They have declared that black people are so stupid that it takes Russians to tell us that we are oppressed. I have never known a moment of black freedom for my entire life. I have never read of a moment since the beginning of a colonial mode of production where black people have been free. And yet they're saying that we are agents of some foreign power because we say black people must be free.
Okay, again, we're not defending that guy because we agree with all of his views. We probably don't. That is totally irrelevant. Whether you agree with what someone is saying has nothing to do with his right to say it. Americans are allowed to say what they think is true, period.
There you go. So that clip of the rally that he played, that was the Code Pink Answer Coalition rally. I know several people who were at that rally. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think of any network you would see a clip of that rally on Fox News? You know?
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
There you go. There you go. I know there were a bunch of people in our space who came out very, very quickly after O'Malley was indicted, and they said, I bet the right wing's going to have nothing at all to say about this. And I thought to myself, give it a chance here. Give it a chance here, because I've made this point before. The thing that right-wingers have that liberals don't is conviction and confidence. They have ideas, and they are confident that their ideas are right, and so they are willing to exchange ideas with people who don't share those ideas. Liberals don't have ideas. The Democratic Party is just a party of middle management. They don't actually have an ideology, which means they're not confident arguing people, which is why they get very insecure about hearing ideas they don't like. That's why they are the censorship people. So this is all of a piece. It's not surprising to me that Tucker came out and said that, because Tucker, whether you think he's right or wrong on most of what he says, he is confident enough in what he says that he's not really threatened by a black socialist leader, because he is convinced that if he were to debate that person, he would win. Now, I personally don't think he would win, but that's the point. The point is we each have our ideas, and we are confident enough in them to be willing to debate and engage with people who don't share them. Liberals don't have that. That's why liberals just don't want to touch any of this stuff. So, Sabby, you also did a great segment on these indictments. I don't know if you saw that Tucker clip yet, but I would love to get your impression on it.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the problem is that, you know, how many of these outlets have actually spoken to Omali Yeshitela or anyone from the Huru movement, right? I have. We have at RBN. Indie News Network has spoken to, you know, those activists as well. Mainstream media are the ones that don't want to reach out to them to have the conversation. And I spoke to Omali Yeshitela last year in September, when this was actually a couple months after the Huru house in Florida was raided by the FBI, right? So they showed up there, they pointed guns at them. The people in this organization had not been violent or anything like that. They just were like, you're working for the Russians secretly. It's just ridiculous. What you have to understand is that this particular movement they're not for the Democratic Party. They're not here to tell you to vote for Democrats to solve your problems because they don't believe that's going to work. What they do have, though, is a community of solidarity where they provide food to people in the community. They have a food pantry. They clothe people. They have a reparation center. They have a solidarity center. They are looking out for the people amongst themselves. So they're not relying on a politician to actually fix those problems for them. This is the same thing that we learned from the Black Panthers, mutual aid. This is what you do. You have to take care of the people in the community yourself. But I think a big part of the problem is that I'm seeing Tucker Carlson talk about this. I am not seeing the Squad or Bernie Sanders, any of them say anything about this. And I think some of them live in Cori Bush's district, some of the ones that were charged.
That's right.
And she's not saying anything about this. Here you have a group of Black socialists just charged by the DOJ. Merrick Garland, obviously a part of this as well. And they're silent. And I'll be quite honest with you. I'm seeing like most of the left independent or so-called left progressive independent media networks, they're not even covering this story. And they didn't even cover it last year when the FBI raided the house in Florida. And you got to ask yourself, what is this all about? Why are you not even talking about it? So it's just what I have learned in this space is that even some of these other progressive outlets, so to speak, will only go so far. And they still kind of want to be in that cushy, acceptable space, you know, to get along and go along with people as well. And so that's very telling. Right now, this organization doesn't have a lot of people behind them to have their back. And I would say this to those of you who champion for Julian Assange, and I'm one of those people as well. We need to free Julian Assange. This should have been a big red flag for people. Look at what they're trying to do in reference to free speech, which we don't have in this country. We do not have free speech. So I tried to tell people back then, what's happened to Julian Assange is very scary, and you should be concerned whether you are a journalist or not. Same thing with what Snowden pointed out. We have to be aware of the fact that they're trying to have authoritarian control over us in this country. And so you have to speak out against these issues. But I will also say, if you are champion and fighting for Julian Assange, but you are also silent on this issue that has happened with Omali Yeshitela and his organization, I'm looking at you side eye too, because you can't just let people go down like this. We haven't seen any evidence, for one, and Omali Yeshitela has been doing this activism with this organization for decades. Like, this isn't something that's new. He's been fighting for these issues and fighting for people in the community. So to your point, Keaton, was he the only one that spoke at that Code Pink rally? No, he wasn't. There were multiple other people who spoke there who agree with Omali Yeshitela, but they chose to target that particular group. And I think it's really interesting that you have the FBI and the DOJ. They are willing to come out guns blazing at this particular organization who is not violent, that's trying to help people in the community. But when it comes to people committing mass murders in this country, they're not guns blazing at them. They handcuff them like Dylan Roof and they take him to go get food. So people have to wake up to what's happening like in this country. These voices that are speaking out against the establishment, these voices that are trying to bring people together under these socialist principles. The government sees those people as a threat, the same as they did with Fred Hampton, the same as they did with MLK and with Malcolm X. And that's why I believe we have not had a real revolutionary voice since then. Neoliberalism has come in and has taken hold of the community, and that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, well, that's what Nick said on System Update. He said, black voices can talk a radical game as long as they fall in line at the end of the day. But if you demonstrate that you're not going to fall in line at the end of the day, now you're on thin ice, and now they will throw the book at you for just about anything they can find. So if there was a failure to disclose on paperwork that they got a contribution from X or Y organization, they'll take that. And, the interesting thing about this is how vicious will the prosecution be? What kind of sentencing will they pursue? How much of an example do they want to make of these guys? Because this whole space of dissent has been a criminalized space, especially for black leftist movements. And to the point where if disclosure of the contributions was really the issue, I don't really buy that, because given the anti-Russia fervor over these past 6 years, I don't buy for a second that they wouldn't have pursued them just as hard had they disclosed it, right? Like if you disclosed any ties to anything Russian whatsoever for the past 6 years, they were going to be on your ass as soon as they were given the power to do it. And once Biden won, obviously that gave them the power of the executive to pursue these things and look into these things and go after you as hard as they want to. And we'll see what happens in this case. But unfortunately, given the past few years, I'm not so optimistic.
Yeah. And I think, we just have to pay attention to things like this. Like, this is why they're coming after people like Matt Taibbi. This is why they came after, Glenn Greenwald when he covered the Edward Snowden story. This is why, they're just trying to find ways to silence these voices that are telling people the truth because, again, manufactured consent. They want the American people to be sheep.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, this seems like a very scary moment because they're coming after everyone in a way that we believe began with the Alex Jones thing. We were both against taking him down because we felt it was going to be a vicious circle. It was going to get the ball rolling. And here we are, they're coming after both right wing, left wing. They're taking things down. They're taking down videos. They're demonetizing left and right to the point that, do you fear for your platform at this point?
Meh. I mean, it's just my advice that I would give to people is to always have something else. So if you have a job, keep your job. Keep your job. If you have a full-time job, keep that job or get a part-time job, but have something as a reliable source of income, because we saw this happen to other people that have been deplatformed since we started. But also, I think you need to diversify your platforms. Like, don't just be on YouTube. Like, I'm on YouTube. I'm on Rockfin. I'm also on Rumble. If you don't have a Substack, get a Substack. You really need to be on multiple platforms nowadays. It didn't used to be that way 7 years ago, but it is that way now. So I think you really have to just tell yourself that this is what it is right now, but it's not guaranteed. So that's the way I kind of look at things is like, we're able to do this right now. Are we going to be able to do this 5 years from now? It's not guaranteed.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the whole space will probably be very different at that point. Right. My guess is that this won't really look the same as it does now. Won't feel the same. Won't operate the same way. That would be my guess.
Well, this is where it gets very complicated, going back to the fact that we had to pull a clip from Tucker here. Where do we go for people to defend us? We're going to wind up having to run to Jim Jordan. We're going to wind up having to run to Tucker Carlson. I'm not kidding. Because who's going to defend us? Joy Reid? Rachel Maddow? Chris Hayes? They're not going to defend us. The New York Times? They're not going to defend us. They're not even covering the Biden story. Taibbi did a piece showing when he searched the New York Times for Morell, nothing came up. So who's going to protect us? So you see this again and again, where you get people like Greenwald and Taibbi end up going on Fox, and it's very the Salem witch trials, right? If you float, you're a witch, and if you sink, you weren't, but you're dead. They drive these people to go onto Fox and then use it as evidence against them. Well, where else were they supposed to go? You're pushing a huge portion of the left into that space because you're denying them all other spaces. And when they go into your space, you accuse them of being Putin puppets. And so, of course, they're going to wind up going there. And for us, really, where else are you going to go to be defended? Look, you got Tucker here defending black socialists. I mean, Jesus, I mean, it's crazy. And you can't find anything, even as you point out, even kind of in our ecosystem. You don't see the Young Turks. You don't see the Majority Report. You don't see Secular Talk.
No.
You don't see any of them talking about this.
No. I mean, they're what we refer to now as the pseudo left. Like, I remember thinking that they were pretty based like back in the day, but so much has changed. A lot changed after Biden won and Trump lost. And I think some people realized that they were going to just get on board with that Biden train in reference to keep their cash flow going,
right,
and to work with that Biden algorithm until they found a candidate to run on the progressive side, which happened to be Marianne Williamson. Once that happened, then it was okay. Let's start looking at all the things that Biden is doing wrong. And I think, it's a game, and you have to know how to play the game. But I would rather play the game in an honest way and in a fair way than try to cheat just to get ahead. And I think that's the big difference. And I just saw Danny Haifong in the chat. Hi, Danny.
Oh, hey, Danny. How are you? Hey, Danny, we would love to have you on the show at some point. So if you want to DM us, we would love to talk to you, Danny. I'm a big fan of yours. All right, so let's get to a couple other stories because I know, Sabby, you have to go fairly soon. So we want to do this. This is a bit lighter, but speaking of platforms, I feel like we can get into this a wee bit here. On April 20th, the infamous legacy blue checks went away on Elon Musk's Twitter. Various celebrities were quick to virtue signal their unwillingness to cough up $8 a month to maintain their Twitter blue account statuses. And so let's just take a look at a few here. Here's Jason Alexander. Okay, everyone, Twitter has removed my verification. I will no longer be posting on this app. Anyone who posts as me is an imposter. I wish you all well. Then he says, one last, I'm on Spoutable and Insta. Take care all. Now you notice he has a blue check mark because I don't know if it was trolling or whatever, but a lot of the people who bitch that their blue checks are being taken away, and people like Jason Alexander, who very famously got paid $1 million an episode for Seinfeld, and I'm one of the biggest Seinfeld fans you'll ever meet, so it does hurt me a little bit to have to go after Jason Alexander in this way, but this was just too much. He says farewell, and then he says, friends told me my blue verified check was restored. Don't know why. I've paid nothing. I gave no number. Stephen King reported the same. My account remains so no one steals the account name. And I can tell you this madness hasn't happened on Insta or Spoutable. It's not madness. I think Elon's trolling you guys a bit. I think that's what's happening. Here's Stephen King. My Twitter account says I've subscribed to Twitter Blue. I haven't. My Twitter account says I've given a phone number. I haven't. Here's Dan Rather. So the blue checkmark saga continues. I guess it's been gifted back. Not digging this new season of Twitter. It long since jumped the shark. Good night. Peace to all. Here's Lincoln Project con artist Rick Wilson.
How does he keep up with the kids' slang that way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. Please note, I have not subscribed to Twitter Blue, though for some mysterious reason, my checkmark is showing again. All these rich fucks unwilling to cough up the $8 for the Twitter Blue, and they want everyone to know it. They want everyone to know that they did not pay Elon Musk the $8. You know, when Elon took over Twitter, I compared the Elon Twitter to the Trump White House, whereas like the Jack Dorsey Twitter was the Obama White House. Like the Elon Twitter was so cartoonishly and chaotically run that anyone thought that they could criticize it and sound smart, whereas the Jack Dorsey thing was much more like the Obama model, which is just very meticulously, professionally managed garbage, right? And there's the same thing where like all of a sudden everybody knows everything. All of a sudden everybody's willing to take a stand against Elon because he's sort of the cartoon villain. Meanwhile, they're just completely willing to fall in line with all of the horrors of the prior Twitter regime, and the same goes now, obviously.
Well,
for
to
Facebook
attack the
and
reporters
Google
exposing it.
Exactly. So I noticed, Sabby, you have your blue check, I have my blue check, and someone else who has way more followers than either of us, Brianna Joy Gray, still has her blue check. And so somebody pointed this out to her. Somebody thought this was a real own. They took a screenshot of one of the recent Bree tweets and said, what's that next to your name? As if, ooh, Carter, busted, right? So she says, I signed up for Twitter Blue back in 2021, long before Elon bought the site, because as a content creator, the privilege to post long videos was invaluable. It still is. I respect alternative choices, but some of us are actually paying for a useful professional service. I have zero shame or ambivalence about this, pardon me, but feel free to kvetch in my mentions if you'd like. Nina Turner defended her a little bit, but then friend of the show,
I didn't know she spoke Yiddish.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't know she spoke Yiddish either. Matt Binder thinks it's his business to come and say, why are you paying to post long videos? You're providing Twitter with content and you're paying them? They're not paying you. You should be posting solely short content here to drive people to see your longer stuff on platforms that actually pay you as a content creator. I thought her response was pretty good. I'd have been a little nastier, but she's a classier person than I am, I guess. Why do you care? And why would I take advice from someone who's been less successful in growing their Patreon than I have? Binder, some of us do this stuff because we care about our audience. Ooh, and as you pointed out, tiny as they may be, and what we choose to support. For others, it's just about the hustle and clout. Message received loud and clear. Just incredible. Incredible. You claim to have a better take on how to reach an audience.
That bastion of integrity. Human penis, Matt Binder.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, I mean, the absurdity, we don't have to read the whole thing here. The absurdity of this. The absurdity of people to virtue say, like, look, we're on Google right now. Well, you think Google is a saintly corporation? We put a podcast out on Apple. Well, you think Apple is a saintly? Like, everybody gives business to unsavory people if you're in this game. You have to. So, again, the selective outrage at Elon Musk, the selective boycott. Well, no, we're not giving him the $8 a month. What Bree said about being able to post the long-form videos is absolutely true. When we put out our semi-viral cowbell video, that was 2 minutes and 39 seconds. If we didn't have the Twitter blue, we would have had to cut that. And as everyone knows, we already cut about as much of that as we wanted to. We needed every second of that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be what it is. So who the hell cares? I mean, yeah, I wish we didn't have to pay it. Sure, I paid $18 for a pizza earlier. I wish I got that for free too. But, whatever. Life sucks. Like to me, the virtue signaling over this is just kind of pathetic, especially since the average net worth of one of those people we just showed is probably $200 million. And they're taking a moral stand over $96 a year to Elon Musk, please.
Yeah, I'm not even familiar with who this Matt Binder person is. Like, to be honest with you, I just know he appears a lot on Twitter. He's probably on one of these shows. I don't know.
On the Majority Report sometimes.
He's a failed film school grad who fell out backwards into this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't watched Majority Report in a long time, but I think that this is what people have to understand about the Twitter Blue. There are some of us like Bree that signed up for that last year just so we could have those features where you can post the longer videos or you can edit a tweet. That's a big one. But when I signed up for it last year, it was $4. And I was like, this is great because I can post these longer videos. It's very hard to constantly post a 2-minute, 20-second video where it still provides the context that you're trying to get across to people. So I was like, great, this is awesome. And then towards the end, I think it was after December, I got that notification that said you were unsubscribed from Twitter Blue. It just unsubscribed me. And then, so for those of us who were already like subscribed, I wish we could have just stayed on, because then what I had to do is resubscribe. And then when you resubscribed, then it gave you the blue check mark, which I didn't even want that. I wasn't even subscribed to Twitter Blue for a check mark. It was just to be able to post those videos. So it's really interesting because I feel like that back and forth, arguing on Twitter is really just, it's not important, or it's not about an important issue, because I feel like with everything that's going on in the country and in the world, people are actually, what Binder dude has been able to do is he's been able to distract people about a check mark so that people are not focused on the real issues that are happening around them. I really don't feel like the Twitter Blue subscription is even important, and whatever people want to sign up for, they can sign up for it. But, where's those same tweets from him about what's happening with the African Socialist Party of people who just got charged by the DOJ? Where are those tweets? Where's the tweets about Merrick Garland, how he should be investigated? Where are those things? So I think, again, these kind of things are a distraction, and I choose to stay out of those beefs and riffs and things that happen on Twitter. But I think that I don't know, honestly, I would have been fine not having the check mark. And that's the thing that people may not understand. For those of us who were signed up for this last year, we were already Twitter Blue subscribers. You just didn't know that because we didn't
Right.
have that check mark.
Right. Me too. Like I signed up for it to be able to post the longer videos. Also, that top articles feature is kind of cool as a content creator. It's cool to be able to click and see, okay, what are people in our space reading? What are they following? Because if we're trying to put a show together, I'll click, okay, what is everybody looking at? Maybe that'll give us an idea for a segment or something like that. So there are certain tools that are useful. Yeah, the check mark, you know, I could care less about that. But also, one of the points that Russell made was that a lot of these celebrity lib activist types, what they are interested in as sort of political expression is cost-free virtue signaling, right? So they can kvetch, as Bree said, and bitch about a blue check mark, but they're not actually willing at the end of the day to simply leave the platform.
Right. They're still talking on Twitter.
I mean, to give credit to
It's amazing.
Jason Alexander, he was actually willing until they gave him his check mark back to leave. Okay, fine. But these others, they're still there. Like
Stephen King.
Right. If you have a million
He won't
Twitter
shut the
followers-
fuck up about
Right.
Twitter.
Right, exactly.
And he's still on there.
He's still on it.
How do
He's
you
still on
stay?
it.
How do you not see that level of hypocrisy?
Yeah, like if you're a celebrity with 1 million followers, there's no doubt that the engagement you bring to the platform by using Twitter as a platform is far more than the $8 a month you would have given Elon Musk if you were willing to cough it up for the blue check mark. Like just being there, just by being there, you're driving engagement, bringing in way more money for Elon than you would if you simply just left, blue check or no blue check.
Yeah. It's if you're still on the platform, I don't understand. Like you may not, maybe you're not paying the $8 or 11, 8 or 11, whatever it is now. Maybe you're not doing that, right? But if you're still on that platform, you're still giving Elon Musk your data, which you are not paid for. So Twitter cannot run without your data. Google cannot run without your data. You are still contributing to the platform, whether you realize it or not. So I'm sorry, if it bothers them that much, then maybe they should leave. Hey, there's Substack notes. Maybe they can go join that. I don't know.
Well, that's the hypocrisy because they know the people aren't there. So they're not going to do that. In the end, they've spent years building up however many followers. That's more valuable to them. I mean, that is shit liberty writ large. You couldn't find a better example than people who are bitching and moaning about Elon Musk and Twitter, who still will not leave Twitter. They want to go on Twitter to complain about Twitter. I mean, what else can you say about these people? And ultimately, their beef with Elon, look, they're all scumbags. Elon, Bezos, and Gates, they are the Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and Rockefeller of our time. They are the three robber barons. Of the three, Bill Gates has done incalculable harm by running cover for the drug companies and claiming that they shouldn't release their IP because they don't have the manufacturing facilities around the world to manufacture the vaccine. Bill Gates should be in jail. He should be in prison. And your issue is with Elon Musk. Not only will these people never say a word about Bill Gates, they worship Bill Gates. They worship people like that. And at worst, they're neutral on Jeff Bezos.
Well, I would put Larry Fink above all of them, though. I would put him, like Larry Fink, if people don't know, that's the owner of BlackRock. He trumps all three of them, and his name is hardly ever mentioned. So it's like, not to mention Bill Gates is stealing like water from people. I had a guest come on months ago that said Bill Gates was stealing water from her town. He's bought up all this farmland. I mean, people are mad about the wrong things. That's why I'm like, why are you guys fussing over a blue check mark? It's just really ridiculous, and it points to people's need to be seen and to be known. It's really bizarre. It's weird culture.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Sabby, it's 8:25. Do you want to stick around for one more segment, or do you have to leave? Up to you.
I can do one more quick segment.
One more segment? Okay, let's do it. All right, Russell, take it away.
Okay, so here in New York, Kathy Hochul tried to deal with the housing crisis we've had statewide, which, this is going on in a lot of states. People can't afford housing. The rents in New York, incredibly, given that we're still losing population, the rents just recently hit a record high. I think it hit an average of over $4,000. It was something like 4,200. So this is partly for lack of any housing development, and this is partly because you run into the wall of the suburbs having zoning that doesn't allow high density housing. So Hochul tried to pass legislation that would make every district throughout the state develop a certain amount of high density housing. And if they didn't do it, their ability to zone themselves would be taken over by the state and they would impose it. Predictably, as always happens whenever they try to pass laws like this, the suburban homeowners would not allow it. But what's interesting and what runs against the narrative is this particularly happens in blue states. New York State, deep blue New York State, actually has the highest income inequality in the nation. Not Mississippi, not Alabama, not Louisiana, New York State. Because in the end, a left party dominated by suburban PMCs is never actually going to do anything for the working class and the poor, because that's going to cost them something. And this actually relates to the segment we just did. They want to bitch about Twitter, but they won't leave Twitter. They want to make claims about how they believe in affordable housing, but they're NIMBYs, not in my backyard. They believe in it until they have to do something about it that might cost them something. So we have the article that was written on this from the city, and then we have a video. All right. So I'm going to go full screen here. Any consensus that more housing was needed was not reached in the suburbs, where opposition to housing development requirements was intense. Quote, the suburbs have been very clear they don't want to be forced to do anything, said Davidson. It's clear the suburban legislators are the big winner. And then we have another exhibit, right? Hochul never developed a political strategy to deal with the suburban pushback, say those who worked on the issue, but asked not to be identified to avoid angering the governor. Meanwhile, the city's agenda was undermined by some Manhattan Democrats who wouldn't back efforts to increase density and who adamantly opposed tax breaks, whether to encourage affordable housing and office conversions or 421A, a tax abatement for developers in return for the creation of income-restricted affordable housing in new buildings. That's enough. So that was a tax break that they had for developers to provide a certain amount of affordable housing within their housing developments. So we're going to take a look at a video that shows same thing in California. And also Democrats have the worst tax policies in states that they control, like Washington. I know I'm max headrooming, but just go ahead to the video.
Okay.
In California, there are cities full of people who say that they are progressive, they're liberals. They believe in a more equal America, a more diverse America. They show up to the marches, they put in the lawn signs about everyone being equal, but at the same time, they're actively fighting to keep their neighborhoods looking like this. Over the past 8 years, the San Francisco area has added 676,000 jobs, but only 176,000 housing units. So a few years ago, the city council voted to change the zoning of one section of the city right here. Specifically this 2-acre plot of land. They wanted to change it from low density housing to higher density housing so that they could build a 60-unit affordable housing complex for elderly members of the community. Okay, so they changed the zoning. Start building the 60-unit complex. No, the overwhelmingly liberal residents of Palo Alto decided to hold a vote to overturn the decision.
This, by the way, when he talks about Palo Alto, this is one of the wealthiest areas in the country. Just so you know, big money.
Decision to revert it back
this
to
is where Google
low-density,
is based.
single-family housing, back to yellow. And it passed, and the zoning was overturned. So now when you go to this plot of land, instead of an affordable housing complex for the elderly, what you're gonna see is this. A row of just a few houses all of them massive and worth around $5 million each.
You go to these meetings in these neighborhoods where they're talking about a new housing project, and it's always the same song, and it goes like this. I am very in favor of affordable housing. We need more of it in this community. However, I have some concerns about this project.
We have the hearts to do this, but we're doing it wrong, and we're dictating and harm onto the neighborhoods.
And then off we go with the concerns, and then nothing ever gets built.
This is happening all over California. And the result is that these neighborhoods are so expensive that they keep anyone out who isn't a part of this small group of super rich residents. Democrats.
All right, so now this next thing, this is only one more minute, gets into the progressive versus the regressive tax systems of a red versus blue state. Here we go.
Believe in a progressive tax system where the rich pay a larger share of their income than the poor. This is like the most basic policy vision of like a progressive movement. It's front and center in Democrats' policy platform.
But if you go and look at Washington State, what you find is that in Washington State, if you look at the state and local taxes that people pay there, less affluent families pay a much larger share of their income in taxes than the wealthiest residents of Washington State. So people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, two of the state's most famous and wealthy residents, are in this lovely situation of paying less in taxes as a share of their income than the poor people who live in that same state. And this is a fundamental inversion of the values that the Democratic Party professes. There is no state with a more regressive system of taxation than Washington State.
And I'm talking like the most regressive, meaning Texas, which is like the conservative bastion of like anti-taxes, is more progressive than Washington State, liberal Washington State.
So there you go. So it's a bit of a nuanced point, because you have to understand when we talk about blue states being more unequal than red states, on a whole, blue states are richer than red states. It's not that they're poorer than red states, but there is such concentration of capital in blue states. New York, California, even Massachusetts, Sabby, where you are. Obviously, it's a relatively small state compared to the real big ones. But obviously, Boston, where you are, highly unequal city. All the cities are becoming like this now. Yep. And these are centers of liberal power, but they're also centers of capital. And the people who live there are just not so keen to walk the walk when it comes to doing all the things that they want to do. As Russell was just saying, it's a NIMBY party with a NIMBY voter base. And so I'd love to get your reaction to that while Russell works the tech out.
Yeah, this has been happening in a lot of these like blue cities. I mean, here in Massachusetts, it's true that the wealth inequality here is huge. It's huge. And the way it kind of works is, you know, you have to look at some of the companies that have come into the Boston area that have caused that to happen. Like part of it is because of gentrification, but why did those people come here to begin with? When you have a tech industry in Boston that is now number 2 after Silicon Valley, which includes the startups as well. When you have a large healthcare industry here, you have education maybe further down the list now, but you do have like higher ed institutions like MIT, Boston University, Harvard. That's going to bring in typically people who are coming from wealthy families and people who have the money to afford to live here. So what has happened over the past couple of years is that those businesses come in, like we have Google here, we have Facebook, like all those tech companies that came in, and then you have the higher ed institutions as well. They brought in a certain segment of the population that can afford to pay more to live in this area. So the people who lived in these working class communities were pushed out by professionals that came in and said that they would offer more money to pay for those apartments. So that's part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is that you have companies that are buying up commercial real estate and that are buying up residential properties as well. So they are buying condo buildings and apartment buildings, and they're flipping these buildings and making them more of a luxury building to live in. And then they're increasing the rent so that the only people that can afford to live in those buildings now are other professionals like them. So the working class people get pushed further and further out. I mean, this is a problem not just in Massachusetts, not just in New York, California, Washington State. You're also seeing this start to happen in the Southeast, in places like Raleigh, North Carolina, which used to be a lot more affordable to live in a couple of years ago, because people are moving from states like Massachusetts and New York, and they're moving to a Raleigh, North
Right.
Carolina, or they're moving to like a Houston, Texas, right?
Austin, Texas. I was going to say Austin. I mean, I'm sure this happened in Houston too, but Austin used to be this amazing bohemian mecca with live music and all this terrific culture. It was a great town. I've been there a few times when I was very, very young, and it was awesome. And I remember my friend and I got a hotel in Austin, Texas. We got a Motel 6 right down the block from UT. It was fantastic. It was $35 a night. Austin was dirt cheap. It used to be dirt cheap and so much fun. And now that has become a sort of Silicon Valley of its own.
Yeah, and they actually have tent communities set up in Austin, Texas now because of this. So what
It's
happens
crazy.
is,
I mean, you'd have never seen that, that long ago. Not that homelessness was never an issue. Obviously, homelessness is always an issue in every city, but you wouldn't have this mass homelessness there even 15, 16 years ago.
but it's true. Like, you have people move from these cities where they're being pushed out, and they move to places like Austin, Texas, or Nashville, Tennessee. I've had friends that have moved there as well. Even Nashville is starting to become expensive. But then what happens is you have this influx of people coming to those more affordable cities, and that drives up the demand. So then those cities start to increase the rent. And now Raleigh, North Carolina, and Austin, Texas, they become more unaffordable for people to live in. So you're not solving the problem by having people move from an unaffordable place to an affordable place, because then the affordable place becomes unaffordable as well. This is a constant cycle. And so for people who live in Washington State, like, I can only imagine, I know Seattle is pretty expensive, but the fact that you have people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos that have kind of come in there and they're paying less in taxes than what they should, based on what I've seen. This is an ongoing issue. And this is something the government doesn't want to step in and fix this. In reference to affordable housing, we've seen it happen here too in Massachusetts. They wanted to do this in a town or city called Newton, which is right outside of Boston. They wanted to do that there. So again, another wealthy area where a lot of doctors and lawyers live in Newton. And they were like, yeah, we should let, more people come in. Then people started to come in, and then they said, okay, but not too many of them.
Right.
This is the whole NIMBY thing. They have the attitude here too in these so-called progressive areas. So they get concerned, not just because there are people that are not as wealthy as them moving into the neighborhood, but also because they say they're going to drive the value of our property down if they move in next door.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another issue that people run into. So this problem is only going to get worse until someone seriously puts some type of rent control or something in place to stop this from happening. Otherwise, I don't know, the homeless population just continues to increase.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're right. I think that has to be a solution that people look into more and more, and there has to be a lot more sort of militant action on that front. And that's part of what Shama did so well in Seattle, which is fight for renters' rights. Because in cities where housing just becomes more and more commodified, that's the only answer. The only other answer is to build new housing projects, which, as you just saw in the video there, you get resistance from these do-gooder progressive lib types. This is part of why Trump has been so destructive to any sort of actual left, because Trump gives these people something to virtue signal about so that they don't have to address these other problems, right? Like, they'll talk about Trump all day until they're blue in the face about the Dominion lawsuits and the January 6th and this and that. Mm-hmm. And that gives them a sort of left credibility in their mind, without having to sacrifice anything, or without having to, approve housing projects, in their area, that'll give people places to live that don't take up more than 30% of their income. Half of New Yorkers are, I think they call it rent insecure or something like that, where if your rent is more than a third of your income, then you are considered like rent insecure, because obviously you have very, very little wiggle room there. If you lose a job or whatever, take a pay cut, something like that happens, you would just have to scramble because it's a third of the rent there. So yeah, I mean, look, it's a terrible situation, and the point that I think Russ was making when he put this together is that the problem of inequality is actually worse in Democrat states and cities because Democrats are now the party of concentrated capital. Or you know what? I shouldn't even say concentrated capital because it's not hyper concentrated in all cases, but it's that 38%. They are the PMC party, right?
Yep.
It's not necessarily 1%ers, although there are plenty of 1% Democrats out there, but it's that upper 38%, right? Who, are sort of comfy where they are and they don't want things around them changing too much. And it's impossible to really create any left momentum within a party of comfortable PMC voters who ultimately are going to want things a certain way in their immediate area. And as you were saying, once they start moving to the cities and once they start concentrating in the cities, then you really have a problem, because it used to be that a lot of rich people would flee the cities and move to the suburbs, and then it was about protecting their suburbs. But once they're protecting the cities themselves, now what do you have? Now you have a real homelessness problem, because there's nowhere to put people who can't afford things. You can't move them out to the suburbs, right?
That's right. And people have to understand those red states won't always be affordable. You know, eventually it's going to get to the point where how many times you hear people in Texas say, people in California, stop moving here. Just stop moving here. You're making the cost of living go up. Like, that's going to happen. It's going to happen in places like Texas. So I think that there needs to be another answer to this problem. We need to have housing for everyone, for one, just guarantee housing for everyone. And even like a place like San Francisco, when I talked to Shahid Buttar, he told me this multiple times. They do have enough housing for people in San Francisco. There's a lot of vacant housing that isn't even being used. People just can't afford to live in it.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Of course. Well, it's the same. It's the same way here. I mean, in New York, I don't know what the stats are now, but back when I was most recently a tour guide, 2019, 1/3 of all new apartment sales were to overseas people who hardly ever lived in any of those units. You know, they would just sit empty most of the year. Russell, are you hearing us? Is your mic on?
I am good. You hear me?
Okay. Yeah, Russell's on his backup computer, the Bat computer.
We got this for my India trip. Knew it would come in handy. I was listening the whole time and crying because I'm like, yeah, of course, right when we got to my segment, the whole thing went sideways.
Well, I hope we did all right for you.
You conducted yourselves admirably. Well, come on, man. We're like the same person at this point. You knew what I was going to say.
Yeah, right, exactly. I had your points down. All right. Well, Sabby, it's about time to let you go because I know you had limited time. But thank you so much for making time for us. Always great to see you, and we'd love to do this again sometime. But tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find me on YouTube. My channel is Sabby Sabs. You can also find me at Revolutionary Blackout Network. That channel is Revolutionary Blackout. And you can find me on Twitter at SabbySabs2. That's the number 2.
All righty. Excellent. Well, Sabrina Sabby, great to see you as always. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
All righty. Bye-bye. All right. So, Sabby Sabs, everybody. Like I said, good influence on us, keeping us in under 2 hours so far this evening. We are going to get to some super chats now. Like I said, folks, we're not ignoring these. We just had to make sure we got through all our material since Sabby did have limited time this evening. But it's always great to talk to her, and we encourage you all to check out her channel. I'm sure most of you guys already have. Yeah, that was a great time. Lots of fun. We'll get to some super chats now. I had something to bring up to Russell, but I forgot what it was. So let's go through some of these. Out here in Nassau, what's the origin of your name? Are you talking about Russell's name, Roger? What's the origin of Russell's name? Mine is just a German Jewish
Whose name are you
last
talking
name.
about?
I guess it was probably it was either yours, maybe it was Sabby's.
I mean, if you're talking, yeah, I would think that would be Sabby's, maybe. Sabby Sabs, because she has that nickname.
Sabrina. Yeah, indeed. But what's the origin of your name?
Dobular. We are pretty convinced that was made up at Ellis Island. As very often happened, people would arrive on Ellis Island and they would change the name to something more anglicized. Because there are no Dobulars who are not related to me. That name almost doesn't exist. So we're pretty positive it was a totally made up name. I've been told by Slavic people that it kind of translates as good man. So like Dobular. So I had some ancestor who was trying to get in. It was like, Dobular! Like, I'm a good man. Let me
Good
in.
man, good man. Let me
Yeah,
in.
I think his name's Dobular. He keeps saying Dobular.
Yeah,
All right, go on,
yeah, right,
Dobular.
exactly. Yeah. Write that down. Folks, hit that like button, please. Hit that subscribe button. We had a big crowd in here tonight for Sabby. Thank you guys all for showing up.
He means DueDissidence. Well, that's a Keaton question.
Oh, so you meant the DueDissidence name. Oh, Roger is still here. Well, good. Excellent. Thank you for sticking around. That just came to me. That just came to me. It was lucky because the coming up with the title of something is always the hardest part of doing something. If it doesn't just come to you naturally, I feel like the title's gonna suck. Like that's what I'm nervous about. I'm thinking of titles for our Jose Vega documentary, and I still haven't come up with one yet. And I'm sure at some point it'll click. But like I feel like a title is something where if it doesn't just pop in your head, it's always gonna feel contrived and weak.
I wanted to go with kill all the pigs and yay Putin.
Yeah, right, exactly. We couldn't do that. Yeah, no, it was just something that came up. I mean, I was subconsciously thinking of plays on words or things like that, but it just seemed to have rhythm. It was short enough, sweet enough, and so yeah, that's where I came up with it. Oh man, my throat's getting coarse. I don't know why. I don't know what the hell's going on. Tusker, thank you for the $20. Hi, Sabby. Glad you're here at DueDissidence. Yes, it was great to have her on. She we guested on Sabby's show about a few weeks ago, so that was a good talk. Always fun to talk to Sabby. Jax, huge fan of Sabby. So happy to see her on the show. Thank you, Jax Page. We appreciate that. And Saul, $2.47, the last of my PayPal balance for the collab. Well, thank you for emptying PayPal for us. That's very kind of you, sir.
Thank you.
Abiding, thanks for the 99-cent super sticker, my friend. Zach, he, meaning RFK, is more than a speech for PTSD Dems. He's earned the benefit of not writing him off as a Bernie, make demands, make clear he must leave when cheated. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, and as Sabby said, the time to do that is now, right? The time to make that clear is now. And one of the things, excuse me, that Sabby did mention is that he was sort of overtly hostile to the mainstream media in that speech, which is something that Bernie never did. You know, he would just never go there. And like I said, look, I've made this point a million times, especially in 2020. There were certain places he couldn't go because of the electorate he was competing for, because of the people he was competing for. Like, unfortunately, and this is the design flaw of the RFK campaign as well. I know people are thinking he's going to bring in more crossover voters. You're not going to outnumber Democratic voters with Republican crossovers.
And a Democratic primary.
You're not going to outnumber them, right? And so that's the design flaw, is that there are certain places you just can't go without alienating too much of that Democratic Party electorate who you need to win a Democratic primary. Right. I mean, so many people just I just feel like it's this thing over and over again where people act as if to compete in a Democratic primary is just to compete for a general vote. Right. Is to make your case to the average person. No, you're not making the case to the average person. You're making the case to, I know this quote made the rounds a lot last time. I saw a lot of people tweeted that they liked this line of mine last time. So I'll say it again. Cowbell waving sub morons. That's who you are appealing to when you compete inside the Democratic primary. And so that to me is the big flaw.
Don't cater to these subhumans, Keaton.
I didn't say subhuman. I said sub morons. Sub morons. Okay. Careful there. Sub morons. RFK Jr. has hundreds of hours of interviews, making his actual positions crystal clear. Must not act like publicist analyzing a speech. Do the research. Well, listen, Zach. You can't just tell someone to go listen to hundreds of hours of content. If you're a politician, you have to make the speeches. Look, I didn't think his speech was bad. Like I think Sabby and I both said we didn't think the speech was bad. I think there are certain inconsistencies that perhaps just come with being part of a sort of ruling class dynastic family like that. Like, it was very interesting to see him almost express a certain sympathy for George W. Bush as having fallen victim to the deceit of the CIA, when it was very, very obvious that George Bush and everyone around him wanted the Iraq War since the 90s. It's not like they tricked him into doing it. In JFK's case, vis-a-vis the Bay of Pigs, they actually twisted his arm and lied to him into doing something that he was very reluctant to do in the first place. That's very different from George Bush going into Iraq.
According to, I can't remember his name, he was a holdover from the Clinton administration, and he was one of the first ones to do a Bush administration tell-all. He was really making the rounds when they were first turning on the Iraq War, and he described the scene where they tried to tell Bush, well, it doesn't look like Saddam had anything to do with it. And according to him, Bush said, Iraq, look into it. Something along those lines, like, shut the fuck up, find me what I need. I'm not interested in your speculations.
Right. Exactly. All right, here we go. Let's see here.
Trouble me
Russell,
with
are
the
you catching the new ones? Yeah. You must be.
Yes, I did.
Thank you, sir. All right, don't worry, we'll get to them. I just wanted to make sure I didn't lose anything. It's actually good that we did a slightly shorter show tonight. The streams have been running long lately, and as much as I love hanging out with you guys, I feel like I am coming down with something. My throat is not in great shape right now. So lucky that Sabby kept us on track this evening. It worked out for the best.
We need a professional around.
It is not great. And it's not like I was talking all day. Like I was sitting in my car working all day. So I don't know what the hell's going on. I got me a throat problem here. Zach, keeping it coming here. Thank you, sir. If you got CIA family, who's best to protect you? I mean, that's a good point. I take that point. Might not be a bad idea having someone on the inside, as they say, if you're Robert Kennedy. Did you see my message about living in China through... Oh, good. I like that logo. Rather than say the word now, he's just putting in a logo there. I don't know. Did Russell, did you see that? Is that to Russell Dobula?
Did I see what now?
He made a message about living in China. Did you send that to us on Patreon?
Yeah, where'd you send it?
You may have sent it to us on Patreon. To those who have messaged us on Patreon, I read all the messages. We're at the point now where I have to be one of these people that's like, we can't reply to all of them. I try to reply to as many as you can. We've been getting kind of blitzed. So I will catch up and read that if you did send it there. And I'll forward it to us.
Yeah, and I'll read it. Look, like I said, I'm a reasonable madman, and I'm doing a lot of research. I'm doing a lot of reading. I'm going to look at a lot of videos, and at the end, I will come to a conclusion. And I'm sure some people will like it, and some people won't, and maybe nobody will. But I'll research it. As far as going to China, listen, it's one of my bucket list things. I was kidding around when I said I wouldn't go there. I would definitely go there. My next thing, I'm doing Italy and Greece in September. And then I'm not leaving during the election year, obviously. But my next spot might be China after that, actually. Depending on what I say between now and then.
Yeah, depending on what you say, right. I'm going to put our patron scroll up, actually, now that we have some time here. We got some new people signed up, so I just want to give a little shout out here. We got some new patrons and new Substackers.
Oh, I see. It was in a thread with Tusker back before I stopped doing that, before I stopped talking in the comments.
Oh, okay. All right, so it was on YouTube. All right, so then he'll go back and find it then, I guess. You can read it. I won't have to forward it to you. Tommy K, Stanislav M, Dwayne V, Money is Obsolete, and James A. Those are our new Patreon members and paid Substack subscribers since our last show, so thank you guys very much for signing up. You can go to patreon.com/DueDissidence and help support this show. You get exclusive content as well as call-in access to these live streams, and you get to help keep our program going here. This is the first of 2 patron scrolls. Our newest members are, of course, on the second scroll, which will be coming up in just a moment.
A non-super chat?
Sure, go ahead.
Since we're kind of hanging out with our folks now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, DueDissidence should just be honest if they want to support DeSantis over RFK. But Russell has strongly hinted it already, and I've heard no absolute objections to the Republican Party. All right. So you're overstating something that I said. If RFK were running in the general election against DeSantis, I don't think that's a question. I don't want to speak for Keaton, but I'm pretty sure we would both vote for RFK. That's not going to be an available option.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to happen that you would have that option.
Right. This is what we said. Run as an independent, and then you have our ear.
And then I would vote.
Right. I mean, because
even if he's not going to win, if he were running as an independent, just to try to get him over the 5%, I would vote for him, and whatever party line he's running on.
Right. Exactly.
I would vote for him just for that reason. But if he's not doing that, I mean, he's certainly not going to be the Democratic nominee. What I have said is freedom of speech is an existential issue. And I'm going to vote for whoever, if there's anyone who convincingly is running on reining in these tech platforms and government overreach.
Right. That's
Basically,
one thing that's one thing that I think probably required clarification. If there is someone who is convincing in their argument that they will do it, not the person who's most convincing, because the person who's most convincing could mean nobody's convincing.
Right. If nobody's convincing on that, then, I'm back to writing in Harvey Dent.
Right.
But, or Dave Chappelle, as I did last time in 2020.
Right. But you're saying if someone does run and convince you that they would be strong on that issue, that person would get your vote. But yeah, no, look, RFK, as it stands now, RFK is not going to be there. It's moot. And it's moot because he's rendering it moot by running as a Democrat. People talk about all this crossover appeal he has. Okay, great. Put it to use. Run outside the two-party system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what do you what is this about?
In the end, come on, man. Let's call it for what it is. One night we're going to have to do some kind of roundtable about this. Somebody's writing me in. I would advise that. We got to do a roundtable about this. Like, everything's crazy, man. Look, Tucker is standing up for the black socialists. It's you got Jim Jordan standing up for freedom of speech. You got Plaskett trying to imprison a reporter. I mean, insofar as you're gonna align with anybody, what's there to align with on the Democratic side? I mean, there just isn't. Which is not to say I align with the Republicans, but on more issues at this point than the Democrats. I mean, the Democrats, as the segment that I set up and then was so rudely unable to deliver because of technology, that was the whole point. Even when Democrats tell you they really care about these things, they're not going to do anything about it. Look to the way they're dealing with Twitter. That's the way they deal with everything. They feel very strongly about it up to the point of it costing them anything. And when you have a party made up of a bunch of wealthy PMCs living in the suburbs, it costing them something basically means anything that would really help working class people. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. The proof is in the pudding. All the most unequal states are blue states. The state I live in is the most unequal state in the country, and it couldn't be more reliably blue, right? So at that point, this very often, even people who have left the duopoly will try to push against, put a gun to your head. Well, but you got to admit the Democrats are better. Not anymore. No, I don't.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any real evidence for that at this point. All right. Dogs for the win. Thanks for the $9.99. Not sure why RFK's views, pre and post, should be minimized as part of his candidacy. You got to use that germ logo there. It's one of his biggest causes. Do you think they're relevant, and do you agree with them? Well, part of the reason why you have the understanding that they're being minimized, because even Sabby, she even covered his launch, and I haven't heard her talk much about this, is because you're not allowed to discuss those views if you want to risk getting the lights turned off on you. And if we get the lights turned off on us, then we can't talk about our views on anything, anywhere. What I'll say about that is like I said to Sabby, it's very difficult to learn what a guy like RFK actually thinks about something unless you hear it straight from him, because the establishment has the knives out for him in such a way that they tend to misrepresent what he says. So I am going to read his book, and then we will discuss it in some forum, perhaps. Maybe we'll do that as our inaugural Rumble stream or something like that. But I mean, it's no accident that you're under the impression that people are minimizing those ideas, because people are not allowed to talk about those ideas. It's horrible. It's obscene. But that's the way it is. And, if you want to martyr yourself, then you martyr yourself. But then you can't talk about anything, right? Then you just give away the microphone entirely. And
that's it.
We're not willing to do that. Like at a certain point, like that is just self-sabotage. You have to stay in the game, right? And so that's what we intend to do. So I'm sorry if that wasn't a fully satisfactory answer. But to answer your question, that is why you don't hear much about that part of his program, is because people on platforms like this don't see any efficacy in talking about it. It's a risk-reward analysis that every creator has to make.
Yeah, and they're going further and further. I didn't want to get into this with Sabby because I don't know where she would stand on this. I didn't want to put her in an uncomfortable position. But hey, man, the way they're coming out after Daily Wire should scare the living shit out of
Right, because these are just
creators.
opinions on social issues, right? You can't claim any sort of broad risk to an emergency health situation or anything like that. You know, it's
Well, what you're seeing now is because the Bud Light boycott is actually working. It's actually effective. This is really fascinating. Like, they feel a need now to shut down conversation because the videos they're pulling are all videos focusing on the person who endorsed. I don't even want to say the name now. The person who got the endorsement deal. They're all videos about that. You can't talk about that.
right.
You can't talk about that. Like, that's not a legitimate thing to discuss. Whether you have people, this is what's really crazy. You have people on Fox News who have been speaking out about this, who have been saying, hey, as a woman, I feel like that caricature of womanhood sets us back 30 years. We fought so hard not to be perceived as airheads like that. I don't want to be represented that way. And you can't talk about that now on YouTube. And I am sure the reason they just look, fucking Matt Walsh, the guy who made What Is a Woman? I mean, he's been talking this stuff on YouTube for years. All of a sudden, they just noticed that he has these views. It's because that boycott is effective, and now they feel like they have to fight back before they start looking to other brands and boycotting them, now that they see they were able to successfully boycott this brand. Whether you agree with it, don't agree with it, that's not the issue. That is terrifying that they're doing that to Daily Wire. I mean, these guys have tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars in their war chest. And even they are being put in this position. So what's going to happen when we really get into this election season? And there are stories like the Hunter Biden laptop. Can we talk about it? Do we all? I mean, news stories like that.
Right. What are they going to say?
What's going to happen?
Right. Exactly.
Are we going to be able to talk about it? Are they going to demonetize us? Are our channels going to get pulled? Because it seems like we're right on the precipice of they're just going to arbitrarily start shutting people down.
Well, it's. I mean, look, we've had a couple of years where Trump, for the most part, has been out of the news. Like, yeah, MSNBC will, you know, their whole operation is Trump outrage, right? But for the most part, mainstream news stories, he's been kind of not part of that because he hasn't been in office. But, you know, as this campaign goes on, you know, this guy brings shit up all the time that what are you going to do? I mean, you have to talk about it if you're doing a news show, right? But, you know, so it's going to put everybody in a tough spot. Absolutely. What happened? I just had one. I just had a super chat.
Oh my God. Look at this. You guys would rather destroy the Democratic Party than heal the country.
Guilty as charged.
Or
Yes,
maybe
guilty.
or maybe you need to destroy the Democratic Party before you can heal the country.
In order to
Because
heal the country.
It's a fucking cancer on the nation.
Okay, good. I thought we had one of them. I'm sorry. I don't think we missed any, but all right. Something happened where I thought I lost one, but I don't
I've
think
been
so.
starring the ones that I saw.
Okay. It said how little momentum there is towards universal health care, says Patrick Donahue. Thank you for the 10 quid there. It's sad indictment of the left, even lefty
that's
YouTube
yours.
channels rarely discuss it. Cancer sufferers going bankrupt, no constant outrage. Well, yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. Obviously, that's one of the issues that animates me the most. But what I've said in the, you know, over the past couple of years is, you know, at this point, there is no momentum behind that issue. And so at this point, a lot of progressives who bring that issue up, it's just a virtue signal at this point, you know, because it's just a way to signify your support for some ideal that you're not going to be able to pursue because you're not going to be able to build the momentum to pursue it. AOC just did this press conference with Greg Casar, I think, on the Green New Deal, right? No noise about the Green New Deal when the Democrats had a majority. Now all of a sudden, Republicans take over within a few months. We're out here with our Green New Deal signs again. It's that. It's a virtue signal. It's not to say it shouldn't happen, but it's a virtue signal.
It's the housing. It's that segment. It's the tax policy.
Right.
They're not actually going to do anything. You got one party that will come out and tell you, no, we don't think you should have health care. We think you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We think it should be up to the church maybe to take care of you if you're in need. We don't think the government's responsible for that. And you have another party that says, no, we believe in health care. And the outcome is exactly the same. It doesn't matter what they say to you. You could argue at least the other ones are being honest. They're actually telling you to go get your fucking shine box. In the end, the Democrats aren't going to give it to you either.
Right. Patrick, Kyle Kalinske lost his dad to the system. Yeah, he talked about how his father died. Couldn't bring himself to speak at Medicare for All rally. Says he's an introvert, didn't want to speak, but will do Politicon debates about the money with some fraud.
Yep.
Who knows with him, but yeah, look, I mean, but even a guy like Kyle will talk about that issue, right? He'll list that off. He'll rattle that off as why he supports Marianne. Medicare for All, Green New Deal, and the wars, this and that. All these things as if these are achievable in the short term, which obviously the reason why we supported the two Sanders campaigns is because we thought that was our last chance to make those achievable in the short term. Not a guarantee they would have worked, but they were the last opportunity to. And part of selling people on a campaign by calling it once in a lifetime means sticking by that when it fails. Okay, once in a lifetime means once in a lifetime. Doesn't mean we do it again 4 years later, which is the ultimate deceit of the Kyle Marianne stuff, is that you pitch the Bernie candidacy, okay, this is our shot here. This is our shot. We can't miss it. We can't blow it. Turns out we did blow it, and so we are where we are. And what a show like ours intends to do is, okay, now that that opportunity's been lost, what do we do from here? How do we move forward, understanding that the major opportunity of our lifetime, or at least of our generation, right, to do something really big, really quickly, is gone. How do we deal with that? How do we process that? And how do we build from that? Whereas Kyle is, well, let's just pretend we're going to have this opportunity every 4 years so that I get engagement on my channel. And like, no, I'm not willing to do that.
Well, that's what I would love to have a roundtable about. Like, because it seems like, you know, you look at the chatter, you look at what people say in the comments, you look at the Twitter dialogue, and you know, people have very, very strong ideas about what we should try to achieve in terms of reordering society. We should have a discussion about that. You know, we have our tanky viewers, we have our right-wing viewers, we have our libertarian viewers. We should convene a panel about okay, so what would that look like? Okay, so so you get your ideal reshaping of American society. What does that look like? How does that work? What is it? Because I don't think anybody really fucking knows. I think a lot of people speak with a lot of confidence who haven't really thought it through. And that, you know, look, that's fine. It's a very complicated question, but we can't pretend we have all the answers on this. And if we're ever going to have answers, we have to sit down and talk about what is this political project we're engaged in? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve? Because yes, in the aftermath of the Sanders campaigns being destroyed and the kind of collapse of Sanders's credibility with his warmongering and his you know, support of Russia narratives, we have no leadership and we have no real focus. So maybe we need one. Maybe we need to figure out what is this political project that we're engaged in. Maybe we need to have a debate, some debates among ourselves.
No, sure. I think absolutely. Absolutely. If it wasn't for them meddling deep state kids, you talk about the RFK again, I would imagine. Thank you, Red Z. Virtuoso, have the Young Turds Milquetoast Report, Irrational National Humanist Resources Report, or David Whackbag reported on the Uhuru movement being raided? I doubt it. I don't think so.
That is the whole list of people I was going to invite to that debate.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, there goes that.
I'm sure they'd have a lot to say. about it.
Thank you, Virtuoso.
I mean, this was something I was going to talk about. Savvy, my technology betrayed me. You know, if you're in this space, you're in a weird position of having to balance being entertaining and being informative. And that also allows you to see when people have just gone all the way to the dark side, where they just want to juice the subs and the algo and be entertaining. And really, I mean, that's what I see when I watch these shows that won't cover the Uhuru group. They're all shows like that, where they act all, you know, ginned up and yeah, man. Nobody's gonna watch these shows if you come on. You're like, and so today,
Right, yeah, exactly.
I mean, yeah, you got to bring a little bit of energy to it. Sure, there's a difference between that and just performing for likes and clicks.
Right.
And that's most of what you see here. When you see Cenk loses, do you really think Cenk has that little emotional self-control?
Right, exactly.
He's not losing his shit.
It's a show, right.
He's performing. He's a dancing monkey. He's putting on a show for you. That's what most of them are doing.
Exactly. Roger Meadows, Washington and Texas have no state income taxes. Is that true? I know there are some states with no state income tax, but I'm not sure.
Alaska doesn't, right? You actually get money from their oil leases if you're.
Yeah, they have like a dividend or something like that.
You get like a dividend.
Passed New York Public Banking Act and State Public Banking New York Act. Thank you for the $2. I haven't heard much about the Public Banking Act here, actually. I knew about the New York Health Act. Zach, wow, that's a very generous donation. Thank you, sir. Respect, Keaton. Here's real Fauci for you and Russ. Many who self-censored from fear propaganda don't appreciate RFK Jr.'s courage to resist that. I encourage you to look into children's health defense and the local communities they build on the ground. All right, well, I will look into that. And look, I do appreciate his courage to say what he feels is right. Like I said, I'm not going to comment on something I haven't really read.
Yeah,
so,
that's it.
You know, so I'm not going to do that. But no, I don't not give him credit for speaking his mind. If he speaks his mind, that's fine. I give everybody credit for that. But you know, to our friend's question back there, I forget his name, who gave us that prior chat that brought that up. People aren't minimizing that because they don't think it's significant. There's the illusion that they're minimizing that because people are not allowed to talk about that. It's that simple. But thank you again. Cool Blue, thanks for the $4.99. Arlen Specter, the late U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, 2009, switched party affiliation to Democratic because he could not win 2010 renomination from the GOP. I remember that when he switched over.
I remember that.
And he was old at the time, too.
Yep.
He was up there. Roger Meadows, sorry.
We already got.
Oh, yeah, what's the origin of the DueDissidence name? Okay, we got that one. It could be a failed strategy, however, I think a kickoff is a Dems best. You guys talk about cowbells getting a backlash. RFK Jr. will be well positioned. All right.
Okay, but you know, where do you think that's going? Where do you think that's going? Like, do you honestly believe that the zombies who vote in Democratic primaries are persuadable to not do whatever they're told? They'll do whatever they're told. You know what? If their media told them to vote for RFK, they would do that too. They'll do whatever they're told.
Exactly.
They have no thoughts of their own. They are empty vessels for whatever their media tells them is what they're supposed to believe to maintain their good standing among their peers. That's
right.
it.
Like that question that Russell asked, very, very simply, should George Bush be indicted? They wouldn't even answer that. Their answer was, well, if a grand jury indicts him.
If
I defer to people
tells me
if it comes onto the TV that he's been indicted and whoever's reporting it seems to think it's a good idea, then yeah, I'm for it. That's it.
The whole Democratic Party are the people that not that I'm suggesting violence against anyone, but they're the people you wanted to punch in high school. They're all those people. They're the hall monitors. They're the good boys and girls. They're those people who never question authority. And that's who is in that party at this point. I saw a guy I know, a very nice guy, I know from the arts world, announce that he's leaving Twitter because of his concerns about misinformation. That's who these fucking people are, man. That's who they are. You're not concerned about the fact that your newspapers all told you that the Hunter Biden laptop was a Russian op. You're not concerned about that
Right,
misinformation. When are you going to cancel your Washington Post subscription? Because all these motherfuckers have that. Right? They were all coming out right after Trump got elected to show you how they had just subscribed to the New York Times and the Washington Post. It was amazing. That's like kicking up extra money to the mob boss who broke your kneecaps. Right. Who the fuck do you think put Trump in office, you morons?
Right.
Exactly. How stupid are you?
Exactly. The chat is asking me to go get some water. I could use some more water, but we're almost done. I think we're almost done. So I'll stick it out. Stanislav, but thank you guys for your concern. Much appreciated. I don't know if I'm getting sick. My kids have been a little sick lately. It's been weird. I don't know what the hell's going on. I despise the CIA, but my relative, I guess, works there, so it's complicated. I oppose arming of Ukraine, but my son is fighting there, so it's a righteous cause. Don't mind if I don't. You're talking about some of the contradictions in his speech. Man, we could get a lot of mileage out of this RFK candidacy if we wanted to. Seems like people are really have some opinions about that, right? Thanks, guys. Thank you, Taya. Appreciate it.
You want to pretend to support him for subs?
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that after the show. Yeah, maybe.
Do you want to juice our people? Yeah. Look, he just put out a TikTok video, and 75 people watched it.
Great news, everybody! Great news. RFK is going to star in the Cialis commercials.
Yeah.
Great news. This is amazing.
This is amazing. Actually, that's a better argument than TikTok, because at least the people who need Cialis
vote.
They vote.
Right.
Those people vote.
Exactly. They vote.
Oh, by the way, I see John to Emily here, so I know it's been a source of much speculation in the online world. We've done the research. We investigated. John to Emily is not a bot.
Yeah, no, you were accused of being a bot, so we thought we would look into it, but it turns out you are not, so we are sorry about that. You are not a bot. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Roger Meadows, thank you for the $5. You should really look at Larry Sharp and have him on. You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because his people actually did reach out to us a while ago asking if we'd be interested in having him on, and we just never quite put it together. But maybe I'll reach back out. Libertarian for Public Banking Worker Co-ops who ran for governor. All right, that's an idea. And speaking of guests, Tusker will be very happy to hear this. We really should invite Norm Finkelstein on. That would be a great conversation. I just heard his interview on Crystal and Kyle. It was really good. It was really funny. He was great on that. I mean, he's a loose cannon, that guy. And, you know, he's got to be in his 80s now, I would imagine. But like the way he talks, like our show, the three of us, it would be like 3 generations of Norm Finkelstein. Like, I feel like we are both en route to becoming Norm Finkelstein. So it would be like a time machine for him. We get to see himself at 3 stages of his life. He had this fucking great line. I have to put this on the soundboard, because he was talking about when he was volunteering for Bernie, how a lot of the volunteers were young women. And he says, that's what made that Gloria Steinem article so terrible. You know, talking about there's a special place in hell.
Yeah.
That's what made her article so outrageous. And he takes a beat and he says, but she's a sack of shit that she always was. He just says that unprovoked. And Crystal and Kyle are not like us. You know, they don't have good senses of humor. They're, stick up the ass, progressives, right? So they didn't really laugh at that. But if he said that on our show, yeah, we'd have been laughing pretty
we would
hard.
have died. All right.
Exactly, yeah.
You sold me.
She's a sack of shit. She always was. Yeah.
We'll
I got to
try
put that on the
get him
soundboard, on the sound drop. That's got to be a sound drop. That should be fun. Roger Meadows. Most importantly, as governor, wants to make New York State a citizen ballot initiative state, allowing us to place initiatives directly on the ballot so New Yorkers can ratify our own amendments to the New York State Constitution. All right, well, that's a good idea. I'm for that. I dig that. I'm down with that. Thank you, Roger. Vote blue no matter who. Dems shouldn't fear New Yorkers throwing it to GOP. Presidential candidate we don't count in Electoral College. 6.5 million regular Ds, 3.5 million regular no party, and 2 million GOP in New York State. All right, well, yes. I mean, look, yes and no. We do count in the Electoral College. New York has a lot of electoral votes. It's just that individually, our votes are not as important because the state skews so heavily Democratic, right? But there are people who say, well, I live in New York, so my vote doesn't matter. It's true. Your individual vote matters less in an electoral college winner-take-all system for each state. But it's not like we have no representation. We do have a decent amount of electoral votes. I don't know what the new number is because of the census, but we're hovering right around 30 votes there.
Yeah, but he's talking about the presidential election. I mean, that's why I really don't care.
Right. No, as an individual, right, exactly.
Write people in. I mean, look, New York has a history of electing Republican governors and Republican mayors. Is it impossible? No, I mean, but in this political climate, I think it's pretty impossible now.
Right.
Like the whole Trump derangement syndrome is going to last a generation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It'll last as long as the media can milk that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Which is quite some time.
Yeah.
Lars and Rune, thanks for the $1.99. Appreciate that. Tusker, hope you aren't getting sick, Keaton. Get some rest, and for God's sakes, get a glass of water and let Russell ramble on his own for a second. I could, but I think we're almost done. I think we're coming down the home stretch. But thank you. I appreciate it. And I will get a glass of water when we're done. I think more than water, I need some of that sort of like throat spray to go in the back of your throat.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Chloroseptic.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing I mentioned about Cloudflare and Kiwi Farms, Russell DW thing. It was insane. What DW? Oh, the Daily Wire thing. Yeah, you did talk about that. Thank you, Taya. Zach, I meant hosts do research so they'll know things like RFK has lengthy interviews on Bush crimes and can tell their audience he's being strategic. Well, like I said, I'm going to read his book on the thing we're not supposed to talk about just so I know what he feels about that. In terms of the other stuff, I already know more or less where he stands on those issues. Not that the media has any great love for his stances on those issues either, because of course they don't. Meteor Dreams. Thanks for the $1.99. How was the boycott effective? The Bud Light boycott.
Their sales are tanking very hard, to the point that now they're feeling the pressure, because now they don't want to say they're firing the VP because they don't want to get the backlash from the other side. She's on a leave. The VP
and they
of
put out that
marketing
ad.
who launched this campaign is on a leave.
They put out that ad with all the very, American imagery and things like that, clearly trying for
Joe
a rebrand.
Rogan did a hilarious bit where they watched that. It was like, basically, there's like if you told Chat GPT to create a commercial of American pornography, like, this is what it would come up with. And that's pretty, so yeah. And their stock price has been tanking. I won't really include that as evidence, though, because the market is so rough right now. But we know that a lot of bars are not carrying it anymore, and it's hurting their sales quite a bit. It looks like their sales are, you're having some of it's anecdotal, but you're having bars, very active, famous bars being like, yeah, I sold one Bud Light in the last month,
right.
And that person ordered it as a joke.
Right.
And then you're seeing in supermarkets, like, it's just sitting there. So this is one occasion where, look, if you could pick a brand where it would be dumber to put out that ad, I can't think of what it would be than Bud Light. No, I mean, that was the dumbest brand they could have done that with. So yeah, it is having an impact, and I think that's why you're seeing some of these platforms starting to lash out, because I think they're getting phone calls like, hey, we can't let this work, because then they're going to start doing it to other brands.
Right.
So you have to crush this now, but I think it's too late. The genie's out of the bottle.
Zach, Russell, I can only say man, Zach is really busting it out tonight. I'm sure glad RFK decided to run. I got to tell you that. Russell, I can only say what I'd like: honest coverage and avoid out of context mistakes. It requires knowing details on a guy smeared more than Brady. Well, that's why I said I wanted to read his book, and I'm sure Russell will too.
All right, I'm going to take this from and I will read it.
Which
right
I think
now,
you were both on a path too. So thank you. Well, thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. Appreciate your contributions.
All right, I'm going to take one from Tusker that's not a super chat. Lord knows that woman gives us enough money and time and charm.
And content.
and content. Update on Russell's
Contributorship.
Disney prediction. Well, have you seen the ratings on The Mandalorian? The Mandalorian like collapsed. Like it supposedly it had there's a guy Overlord DVD who has inside sources.
Okay, hold on. I will be back.
Yeah, go ahead. I say he legit has inside sources because he's been right in the past when he's claimed his sources told him this is the plot of a movie and this is what's going on with the production. So he has some credibility. He claims that his sources told him there was like a second to third episode drop of something like 93%. Like they never saw anything like it before. The closest thing they ever saw to it was actually She-Hulk, which had a 75% drop off between episodes. So yeah, I mean, Mandalorian completely tanked. Ant-Man lost money. Ant-Man Quantumania lost money. And the Marvels trailer got severely ratioed. So yeah, I mean, Disney's falling apart. They just announced, I think, layoffs of another 7,000 workers. So yeah, they're in trouble. My prediction, it is all coming together.
See, he broke me. I ended up getting
everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
I figured, all right, if we're gonna do this Disney thing, I'm gonna have to go get some water.
Yeah.
I won't make it. But yeah, no, and yes, people say tea. Yeah, it's funny, my wife just got some lavender tea, so maybe I will make myself some tea. I thought about making tea for the stream tonight. I do carry water by the stream tonight, but I didn't carry enough this evening. And tea I was going to make too, but we were kind of rushing to sit down. These 7 o'clock streams are a little harder. They come together a little bit more last minute than the 8 o'clock streams because we have that extra hour when we do at 8 o'clock. We don't have to be ready till 7:30, so we can kind of prep,
Oh yeah, Jonathan Majors, man, they really can't catch a break. I mean, that's not their fault. Jonathan Majors has like women claiming to have been abused by him coming out of the woodwork.
Right.
He just got dropped by his agent. Disney's gonna end up having to get rid of him. They just haven't done it yet.
My chair, I have a better chair than this. Thank you, Arpoon. I appreciate that. I do have a better chair than this, but it is back at the old place, which I'm going back up. I'm going back down there on Wednesday to get the last of the stuff, so I will get my good chair. But thank you, Arpoon. Appreciate it. Was there another one that I missed here? Yeah, Donald grabbed him by the pussy. Trump. Finkelstein reminds you of a leftist Michael Savage. It's interesting you say that. That is somewhat true. He is pretty. He is pretty rough, which is great, which is fun. That's why I think it will be a really fun talk.
That would
be a really fun talk.
Definitely, I've seen it. Yeah, he's funny. He's funny.
Funny guy. You got to stream on Rockfin, guys. These YouTube chats are too. Yeah. Too much. Yeah, we are on Rockfin. We actually do stream on Rockfin. In fact, we're on Rockfin right now. Let me see how many people are watching us over on Rockfin. Probably 0. Even though we have like 1,000 followers there. I don't know. Something's weird with the viewers.
Do we have 1,000 followers there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a decent amount of followers, but I don't know how it works.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah,
get it.
yeah, we are on
We
Rockfin.
don't understand Twitch. We don't understand any of this shit. This will gratify you, Keaton. It was your baby.
Oh, yeah. We should bring it back. It's just, it's one of those things to find. Although, actually, we should bring it back, just maybe not as a regular weekly thing. But I've heard, and Sabby actually said that the Netflix show Beef is really good. And Russell has said that too. So maybe I should watch that.
I told you to check it out. I think you'll find it really interesting.
Sinead, like the damn stream already. Thank you, Sinead. Appreciate that.
What was the Korean film that won the Academy Award?
That was Parasite.
It kind of has overtones of Parasite. Like it's its own thing, but it definitely has elements of that.
All righty. I will check that out for sure. All right. I think that's everything. I think we got through all of our super chats, everything. Thank you guys very much for tuning in this evening. This was a really fun one. That's everything we got, right, Russell?
I believe so.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much once again to our guest, Sabs, for making this happen with us this evening. It's always great to talk to her. Always great to talk to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Hit that like button, please, and hit that subscribe button on the way out. Very, very important. Patreon.com/DueDissidence, DueDissidence.substack.com to help keep us going. We will be back here this Thursday night at 8 p.m. Until then, please be safe, be well. You can subscribe to our audio podcast player so you get all these shows on the audio as well in case you miss a stream. Obviously, subscribe to YouTube, Rumble, Rockfin, all those places. DueDissidence.substack.com to stay in touch with us. Even if you cannot sign up as a paid subscriber at Substack, signing up for free helps you stay in touch with us, so it's a great thing to do. Thank you guys very much. We will see you guys on Thursday. Be safe, be well.
Courage.
Please clap.